Chapter 87. Master Lin, are you going to accept this challenge or not? Please give us a clear answer. The middle-aged man smiled insincerely. If you don't, then bring us 5 mid-grade spiritual pills and we'll pay you the full price. On the Xuanhuan continent, spiritual pills had always been priceless. Apart from pill-making families, most other families would only buy them, not sell them. These two people from the Wang family had gathered a large number of middle-grade elixirs in the past year through forced buying and fighting. They had even gotten their hands on a few high-grade elixirs. Now that they had come to the Lin family, they were naturally unwilling to return empty-handed. Lin Xuanhuan clenched his fists, sighing helplessly in his heart. Just as he was about to speak, he heard the crisp voice of a young girl. "I'll accept this challenge." Xuanhuan walked in, her hands clasped behind her back. She wore a thin emerald green robe and a bamboo veil over her face. Both the middle-aged man and the gray-clothed youth were stunned when they saw Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan stood in the middle of the hall and continued, "On behalf of the Lin family, I accept your challenge." "Where did this silly girl come from? Don't cause trouble here." The middle-aged man chided. The gray-clothed youth smiled at Xuanhuan. "Little girl, you must be one of the young ladies of the Lin family. I'm challenging Master Lin, so don't cause trouble." "Ruoyan, when did you arrive?" Lin Xuanhuan asked. Xuanhuan turned and walked up to Lin Xuanhuan's side. "I just arrived when I heard an arrogant fellow challenging you, grandfather. Given your status in the pill-making world, wouldn't you be lowering your status by accepting this junior's challenge?" Xuanhuan turned her head and glanced at the gray-clothed youth. "That's why I'll accept this challenge for you." As she spoke, she lightly hooked her arm around Lin Xuanhuan's, her relaxed attitude causing Lin Xuanhuan to fall into a daze. He immediately guessed that Xuanhuan must have made a breakthrough in her cultivation, but even so, she couldn't possibly accept a 5th-rank pillmaster's challenge. "Grandfather." Xuanhuan gently squeezed Lin Xuanhuan's arm, her bright eyes looking at him. "This time, let me do my part for you and the Lin family." Lin Xuanhuan's heart was filled with relief. Casting aside his worries, he smiled. "All right. You're my last disciple, so it's only right that you accept the challenge on my behalf." He then looked at the gray-clothed youth and said, "Wang brat, I'm a generation older than your father. You're not qualified to compete with me on the same stage. However, my little granddaughter has already received my teachings, so I will let her accept your challenge. I wonder if you dare to accept." "What a joke." The middle-aged man snorted coldly and said with disdain, "It seems that the Lin family really has no one left. They used a little girl who is still wet behind the ears as a shield. Aren't they afraid that others will laugh at them?" Before the middle-aged man could finish speaking, Xuanhuan suddenly extended her right hand toward him, and a red mist seeped out of her palm. That mist instantly turned into an orange flame that licked at the middle-aged man's face. With a loud boom, the flame dissipated, revealing the middle-aged man's charred face, his mouth agape. "Uncle, I suggest that you be more careful with your words in the future." Xuanhuan smiled. "Otherwise, the consequences will be dire." Just as Xuanhuan released the flame, Lin Xuanhuan's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly suppressed the joy in his heart. However, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Not bad at all. As expected of my disciple." The gray-clothed youth's eyes also lit up, and his previous disdain for Xuanhuan disappeared. "I was blind just now, Mississippi? So you're a hidden expert. Of course you're worthy of my challenge, Mississippi." "All right," Xuanhuan replied. "But I'll be the one to decide the time." "Of course." The gray-clothed youth didn't beat around the bush. "Miss, when would you like to compete?" Xuanhuan thought for a moment, then waved 2 fingers. "How about 2 years from now? If you want to compete, then why wait 2 years? The middle-aged man wiped away the black scorch on his face and said angrily, "I'll teach you, a little girl who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, a lesson." Having been ambushed by Xuanhuan, the middle-aged man rolled up his sleeves, looking as if he were about to beat her up. "Wang Gang," the gray-clothed youth called out. "Don't be impudent." The middle-aged man turned to look at the youth, but the youth didn't seem angry. Instead, he stared at him with a pair of long narrow eyes. "Yes, young master." Wang Gang finally lowered his head, retreating to the side like a defeated rooster. The youth then turned to Xuanhuan and smiled. "Isn't 2 years a little too long?" Xuanhuan sighed. "I'm only 13 this year and I'm only considered an adult at 15. Young Master Wang, you're not thinking of competing with a minor, are you?" Xuanhuan's words caused the youth to choke. She had seen through this gray-clothed youth's arrogance, and it was only natural that arrogant people cared a great deal about their reputation. Even if they won against a minor, what face would they have? In that case, 2 years is 2 years, the gray-clothed youth replied. The youth walked up to Xuanhuan and introduced himself. My name is Wang Meng, the eldest son of the Wang family of the Yu Kingdom's four-nation merchant alliance. May I ask for your name, miss? You're Wang Meng? Xuanhuan suddenly asked. Yes, I am. Wang Meng looked at Xuanhuan suspiciously. Miss, do you know me? Wang Kuang's brother, whom she had killed in the imperial territory, and the person who had injured Lin Zainin in a competition in her past life, was this gray-clothed youth in front of her. Xuanhuan's eyes turned cold, but only for a moment. Very quickly, a smile appeared on her face. Wang Meng, famed pillmaster of the Yu Kingdom. I've heard a lot about you and I look forward to competing with you in 2 years. Me too. Wang Meng raised his hand toward Xuanhuan. I'm Xuanhuan, Lin Zainin's last disciple. Xuanhuan raised her hand toward Wang Meng's. With a loud smack, a frightening killing intent flashed through Xuanhuan's eyes. Wang Meng and Wang Gang finally left. Lin Zainin looked at Xuanhuan excitedly, his large hands on her shoulders, his white beard trembling. Ruoyan, you broke through again so quickly and not just by one stage. Lin Zainin had told Xuanhuan that spiritual fire could be divided into 7 stages, each of which was further divided into 7 different colors: red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and violet. A newly formed spiritual fire would be red, and as one's cultivation deepened and the fire-attuned spiritual energy in one's spiritual vortex became purer, the color of the spiritual fire would change, slowly turning from red to orange. By the same logic, as one continued to cultivate, the orange flame would slowly turn yellow, and so on until one reached the violet stage. The red flame of the first stage couldn't be used to refine pills, but the orange flame could be used to refine low-grade spiritual pills. The cyan flame could be used to refine high-grade spiritual pills, while the violet flame could be used to refine the legendary sacred grade pills. At his peak, Lin Zainin had only been able to condense a green flame, which could only be used to refine mid-grade spiritual pills. I never thought that my good grandson's talent in alchemy would be so strong. In such a short period of time, not only did he manage to condense the spiritual fire, he even managed to condense an orange spiritual fire. Lin Zainin had been worried that Xuanhuan would accept the challenge, but now he could finally relax. Ruoyan, I believe that even if you can't surpass that Wang brat in 2 years' time, you won't be any worse than him. Grandfather, Xuanhuan replied firmly, I'll definitely defeat him. Lin Zainin handed her a spiritual pill recipe book, instructing her to memorize its contents. He also told her to come to the Lin Manor the next day so that he could teach her the simplest way to refine pills. When Lin Qingxin and Lin Qingxue learned that Xuanhuan had successfully condensed the spiritual flame, they hugged each other and jumped up and down in joy. Then they began to regret that they hadn't been there to witness such an exciting moment. Lin Qingxin dragged Xuanhuan to her bamboo garden, saying that she had something to show her. However, Lin Qingxue, who loved to join in on the fun, hurriedly said that she had to do the homework that Lin Zainin had assigned her for the day, and then ran off. Lin Qingxue was a bold girl, but as soon as Lin Qingxin's bamboo garden was mentioned, she immediately turned into a coward. Lin Qingxin's bamboo garden contained many creatures that made her scalp numb. For example, there was a toad as big as a wash basin, a scorpion with a 10-foot-long tail, a centipede with a pair of large eyes, and a catfish that could laugh. Every single one of them made Lin Qingxue's heart tremble and give her nightmares. Unfortunately, her only sister preferred to spend so much time with these creatures that she couldn't even fulfill her wish to visit her sister. Sister Ruoyan, look. Lin Qingxin pulled away a piece of black cloth, revealing a transparent crystal cover. Xuanhuan looked in the direction of her finger. Through the cover, she saw a small white snake about 3 inches long lying on the black sand. Is this the result of the snake egg you brought out of the imperial territory? Xuanhuan stared at the little snake. Yes. Lin Qingxin replied. There were 5 eggs in total, and this is the only one that hatched. The snake's entire body was snow white, and it lay there motionlessly as if it were an ice sculpture. Xuanhuan had seen both green and black snakes before, but this was the first time she had seen such a snow-white snake, and she found it rather cute. Has grandfather seen it before? Xuanhuan asked. Of course. Lin Qingxin leaned closer to the crystal cover and propped her chin on her hand. Without grandfather's help, I wouldn't have been able to hatch even one of the 5 eggs. Does it have any special abilities like the ability to breathe fire? Xuanhuan pointed at the crystal cover, and as if sensing her, the snake suddenly opened its eyes and turned its head toward her. Yun Ruoyan exchanged a glance with the snake, and she immediately shook Lin Qingqian's arm. Look, Qingqian, look. It even has double eyelids. Chapter 88. As if it could understand Yun Ruoyan's words, the little snake wriggled its body toward her. Yun Ruoyan knew that the higher a snake's rank was, the worse its vision would be. This little snake, which had just hatched, had a pair of large pitch-black eyes, like two black pearls without any impurities. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but think of Li Mo, the fellow who also had pitch-black eyes. The little snake slithered all the way to Yun Ruoyan's front. Separated only by a transparent crystal barrier, its pitch-black eyes met hers. Yun Ruoyan raised a finger and tapped the crystal barrier, and the little snake kissed the spot she had pointed at. Wow! Yun Ruoyan exclaimed once more. After her 2 encounters with snakes in the imperial territory, she didn't have a good impression of them. At first, she hadn't even suggested that Lin Qingqian bring the eggs back to incubate them. But now that she looked at the little snake, all she felt was how adorable it was. How magical. She turned to Lin Qingqian. I didn't expect it to be so obedient. It's so young, but it's already human-like. Why do you still a baby snake, just like a few months old baby? How can it understand human nature? Lin Qingqian said, moreover, it has a very bad temper and is not obedient at all. But it's clearly very obedient. Yun Ruoyan didn't understand. Lin Qingqian smiled mischievously, then stretched out her left hand in front of Yun Ruoyan. That's why it's so quiet. On Lin Qingqian's left hand's middle finger was a simple black ring with a snake pattern carved on it. Isn't this the ring from the imperial territory? Yun Ruoyan asked. More than a month ago, they had found quite a few treasures in the Cave of Wild Vines, one of which was a snake ring. Lin Qingqian had loved it as soon as she saw it, so she had given it to her. However, Yun Ruoyan hadn't noticed when Lin Qingqian had started wearing it. I accidentally discovered that this ring can be used to control snakes. Xianxia moved the ring back and forth on her left hand, and the little white snake began to dance along with her movements. When Xianxia didn't move, so did the little white snake. Grandfather said it was a magic ring. Xianxia removed the ring from her finger and handed it to Yun Ruoyan, motioning for her to put it on. Yun Ruoyan took the ring and put it on her middle finger. Suddenly, a pair of black eyes flashed through her mind, emitting a cold light. It was just a flash, but it seemed to see through the depths of one's heart. Yun Ruoyan looked at Lin Qingqian in surprise and was about to ask what was going on. The first time I saw those eyes in my mind, I was shocked too. Lin Qingqian spoke before she could. Later, I gave the ring to my grandfather. He said that it was the eye of the previous owner of the ring. Although the owner was dead, his magic was injected into the ring. This is the legendary One Ring. Yun Ruoyan followed Lin Qingqian's example and pointed the ring on her finger at the snake, but it simply lay there lazily, not responding at all. Lin Qingqian had Yun Ruoyan infuse spiritual energy into the ring. The moment Yun Ruoyan infused the ring with her spiritual energy, the pair of eyes in her mind appeared once more. This time, however, it wasn't just a blur, but a physical presence. Yun Ruoyan could feel that pair of demonic eyes looking at the snake through her own eyes. Then the snake began to move, following Yun Ruoyan's instructions. Is there really magic in this world? Yun Ruoyan looked at the ring on her finger in disbelief. The realm of demons, magic, and demonic artifacts. These were all things that the storytellers in the tea houses described as illusory. The storytellers loved to talk about a great war between humans and demons 1,000 years ago. Humans had relied on their spiritual energy to defeat the demons, and from then on, the demons had retreated into the darkness. At the time, Yun Ruoyan had listened to the storytellers with great interest, but no one had taken them seriously. Grandfather said that 1,000 years had long since blurred the lines between reality and illusion. When he was young, he even investigated whether the demons really existed, but he didn't find much. However, this one ring can serve as proof of their existence. Yun Ruoyan returned the ring to Lin Qingqian. Lin Qingqian took the ring and said happily, although I don't have the talent of a summoner, I can control and command snakes with this ring. Whitey will be my first magical beast. In the evening, Yun Ruoyan left the bamboo garden and returned directly to the Yun Manor. When she entered her cottage, she saw Xilan busily cleaning up the phoenix petals in the yard, and she walked over. Xilan also saw Yun Ruoyan, and she happily presented her treasures. Miss, look at these petals. Xilan grabbed a handful of petals and gently lifted them up. The petals floated down in the air, emitting a faint fragrance. May I ask if Miss Yun is around? Suddenly, an unfamiliar woman's voice came from behind Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan turned around to see a plainly dressed woman standing by the door. She didn't wear any makeup or accessories, and although she didn't look young, she had a certain charm about her. I am. May I know who you are? Yun Ruoyan asked curiously. Ruoyan, so you're Ruoyan. The woman was both surprised and delighted to see Yun Ruoyan. Don't you remember me? I'm your third concubine. The woman stepped forward and grabbed Yun Ruoyan's hand. I haven't seen you in 3 years and you've grown so beautiful. I thought you'd die. Yun Lan had a total of 5 concubines and his third concubine, Qin Jianmei, was one of the more familiar to Yun Ruoyan. Madame An and Lin Yuemei had entered the household at the same time. Madame An had been betrothed to Yun Lan before she was born, and Lin Yuemei and Yun Lan had fallen in love. Originally, Madame An was supposed to be Yun Lan's legal wife, but Lin Yuemei had suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and Madame An had no choice but to become his concubine. After Lin Yuemei passed away and Madame An became his legal wife, Yun Lan, who had never been interested in women, took in 3 concubines in a row. Only his third concubine gave birth to Yun Ruoyu, and the other 2 concubines had no children. Later, for some unknown reason, those 2 concubines were sent to the Yun Manor, and only his third concubine, Qin Jianmei, remained in the Yun Manor. Yun Ruoyan's impression of Qin Jianmei was that she was an amiable person who didn't like to fight, and she spent most of her days praying and praying to the Buddha. Why had she suddenly come to her rooms today? Madame An, what brings you to my rooms today? Yun Ruoyan smiled. Madame Qin's face revealed a troubled expression and she began to stammer. Yun Ruoyan immediately understood that Madame An was here to plead on behalf of her daughter, Yun Ruoyu. It had been more than half a month since Yun Ruoyu had been grounded by the Yun matriarch for poisoning Yun Ruoyan. At the time, the Yun matriarch had declared that unless Yun Ruoyan agreed, she would remain grounded. During this period of time, Yun Ruoyan had been so engrossed in her cultivation that she had completely forgotten about this matter. Ruoyan, I know that Ruoyu has gone too far this time. Madame Qin finally spoke up. It's all because I, as her mother, didn't teach her well. Can you spare her this time, on account of my past relationship with you? Yun Ruoyan looked at Madame Qin's hopeful eyes, and she couldn't help but think back to the time when she had been kicked out of the family academy. To Yun Ruoyan, that had been a period of transition from heaven to hell. She had gone from a cultivation genius to a useless piece of trash, from a high and mighty wife-born daughter to an ugly monster that no one wanted to see. Every single person in the Yun family who had bowed to her in the past wanted to find a chance to spit on her. Only this third concubine still respectfully called her young miss as usual. That time, when Yun Ruoyan had been severely injured in the family tournament, it was Madame Qin who had taken care of her for 3 days before her condition had gradually improved. In her past life, Yun Ruoyan hadn't known much about gratitude, and she had spent her days in self-reproach. As a result, she hadn't cared for anyone who had helped her in the past. But now that she had been reborn, Yun Ruoyan had to repay Madame Qin's kindness. Madame Qin. Yun Ruoyan grasped Qin Jianmei's hand. Since you've asked, I naturally can't refuse your request. Although you don't participate in the struggles of the inner court, I know that your heart is as clear as a mirror. Yun Ruoyan sighed. I'm sure you've noticed that Ruoyu has been used as a tool by someone else this time. She's a headstrong girl and I'm sure she hates me to the bone. I hope you'll be able to persuade her, Madame Qin. Otherwise, if there's a next time, don't blame me for disrespecting you. With Yun Ruoyan's permission, Qin Jianmei nodded profusely and headed to Yun Ruoyu's cottage to report the good news. Within her cottage, Fragrant Grass was applying medicine for Yun Ruoyu. Her hands trembled as she held the gauze soaked in medicine, and she didn't dare to touch it. Useless thing, if you can't even do something as simple as this, why should I keep you around? Yun Ruoyu shouted angrily as she snatched the gauze from Fragrant Grass's hands. Frightened, Fragrant Grass immediately knelt on the ground and apologized profusely. Yun Ruoyu looked at the mirror, her chest heaving. In the mirror, she was only wearing a tube top, and her exposed neck and collarbone were covered with large, dark red scars. Some of the scars had already scabbed over, while others were still revealing flesh. In the hot summer evening, they emitted a strange stench. Yun Ruoyu's hands trembled as she gritted her teeth and pressed the gauze onto her wounds. An intense pain spread through her entire body. She couldn't help but cry out in pain as she swept the mirror on the table and the basin of medicine to the floor. The basin toppled over and the medicine spilled all over her body, causing even more pain. Yun Ruoyu's screams rang out from her cottage. Qin Jianmei could hear Yun Ruoyu's screams from afar. She gripped her handkerchief tightly and quickened her steps. Chapter 89. Miss, don't move. Vanilla tried to pull Yunruoyu away. Miss, the doctor said that you can't touch this wound so casually, or it'll be even harder to heal. Yunruoyu pushed Vanilla away and yelled for her to scram. Just then the curtains parted and Madame Qin walked in. Ruoyu, are you alright? Qin Jianmei hurried over wanting to pull Yunruoyu up, but Yunruoyu pushed her away as well. Her face was covered in tears, and her expression was contorted. Mother, are you here to laugh at your daughter's plight? Silly child. Qin Jianmei's tears fell uncontrollably. You're my child and I can't wait to feel sorry for you. Why would I come here to laugh at you? Qin Jianmei hugged Yunruoyu, and the two of them burst into tears. I've already pleaded with your second sister. From tomorrow onwards, you won't have to be confined anymore. Madame Qin wiped away Yunruoyu's tears with a handkerchief. Take this as a lesson. Listen to me in the future and we'll live peacefully and not provoke anyone. Yunruoyu pushed away Madame Qin's hand. Mother, look at me, look at me. I can't take this lesson. Madame Qin's gaze landed on Yunruoyu's neck, and she sucked in a breath of cold air. Who gave you this poison? Madame, and wasn't it? Yunruoyu had never seen Madame Qin so angry before and she froze. It'll leave scars on anyone who comes into contact with it, and it'll be extremely difficult to heal. The flesh will rot away layer by layer. Madame Qin's expression was unprecedentedly ugly. Madame N actually allowed you to poison Yunruoyu with such a vicious poison. If Master Yun were to find out, both of us would be chased out of the Yun family. Silly child, how could you do such a thing? Yunruoyu was frightened by Madame Qin's expression. I was just muddle-headed. Mother said that they wouldn't find out. Of course not. Madame Qin said anxiously, you have been used by First Madame, do you know that? Yunruoyu didn't argue any further. Although she was impulsive, she wasn't stupid. In the pavilion, Madame and Yunruoyao had already made her a scapegoat. During this period of time she had been confined. Madame N had only sent someone to check on her injuries at the beginning, and then there had been no further news. I know I was wrong. Yunruoyu finally cried, Mother, please help me. How can I face others in the future? Madame Qin sighed deeply and helped Yunruoyu up. Gently she said, your wound can only be treated with a high-grade antidote, a green lotus pill and a nourishing cream. Before marrying Yunlan, Madame Qin was a somewhat famous apothecary who specialized in detoxification. Yunruoyu's eyes lit up, but they dimmed in an instant. High-grade spiritual medicine, where would she go to find it? For your sake, Mother will definitely think of every possible way. Madame Qin held Yunruoyu in her arms as she looked out the window. Dusk had already fallen, and the sky was gray and hazy. At night there was a strong gale, followed by thunder and lightning, followed by a torrential downpour. In her cottage, Yunruoyan flipped through the secret manual that Lin Zainan had given her. Most of the recipes were low-grade spiritual herbs, and Yunruoyan had memorized most of them after flipping through them twice. Out of boredom, Yunruoyan put down the book and closed her eyes as she entered her pocket dimension. Within the pocket dimension, Xianxia was floating in the air, cultivating. Yunruoyan didn't disturb it, instead taking inventory of the items in her pocket dimension. Ever since returning from the imperial territory, there had been quite a number of treasures in her pocket dimension, and she had never taken a good look at them. Yunruoyan hadn't expected Xianxia to be so organized. The spiritual herbs, pills and secret manuals had all been neatly organized by Xianxia. Yunruoyan could almost see everything at a glance. The high-grade furnace had been placed in the most obvious position, and around it were the various herbs she had obtained from the Thousand Herb Valley. Most of them were ingredients for refining low-grade spiritual pills. Tomorrow, after learning the basics of pill-making from Lin Zainan, she would be able to try refining pills with a high-grade furnace. As she thought of this, Yunruoyan couldn't help but smile. Right, there's also this treasure. As Yunruoyan muttered to herself, she opened a red wooden box, and a faint medicinal aroma wafted out. This was the medicinal rabbit's core, an excellent ingredient for refining mid-grade spiritual pills. Yunruoyan took a deep breath of the medicinal rabbit's core, then closed the box and put it back in its original position. Unintentionally, she noticed that there was a book beside the box. The cover of the book was a strange, withered yellow like a dried leaf. Only then did Yunruoyan remember that she had found such a book in the wild vine spirit's lair, but she couldn't remember when she had placed it in her pocket dimension. Yunruoyan picked up the book and flipped it open. The inside of the book was also a withered yellow, but it felt a little more slippery to the touch. She didn't know what material it was made of. She flipped the book over and over again, not even leaving a gap open. She couldn't find a single stroke, let alone a single word. Xuanhuan's heart was filled with suspicion. Who would be so bored as to create a wordless book? She felt that the book was very strange, and the stranger it was, the more she was interested in it. Xuanhuan took the wordless book and glanced at Xiaoqiu, who was still cultivating, before leaving the pocket dimension. When she opened her eyes, the wordless book appeared in her hands. She held it in front of her eyes and said, "There's definitely something wrong with you. I'm going to unravel your secret." Then Xuanhuan got off the bed and walked to the table. She reached out and removed the lampshade from the oil lamp, then placed the book directly over the flame. The book roasted on the flame, but there was no sign of it burning, nor was there any sign of it turning black or hot. Not a single word appeared on it. Could it be that normal flames were ineffective against it? With that thought, Xuanhuan immediately released her spiritual fire. However, the spiritual flame that could scorch a person's face black had no effect on the book at all. The rain continued to pour outside, and the entire Yun household had sunk into silence. Xuanhuan, however, didn't feel the slightest bit sleepy. Instead, she began to struggle with the strange wordless book. If fire didn't work, she'd use water. If water didn't work, she'd use a knife. In the end, even a knife couldn't leave a single mark on the book, and Xuanhuan finally gave up. She casually placed the book in a corner of her dressing table, yawned loudly, blew out the lamp, and went to sleep. It was already late at night, and the rain outside the window had begun to lessen. It pattered against the ground, against the flowers, and against the surface of a plain oil paper umbrella. Under the umbrella, Qin Jianmei stood outside the bamboo pavilion, dressed in a lotus-colored chiffon dress embroidered with pink peach blossoms. She had dressed up for once, and a peach blossom hairpin inlaid with a ruby was inserted into her intricate bun. A thin layer of powder covered up the fine wrinkles on her face. Her eyebrows were elegant, and her lips were like fallen flowers. She was just as beautiful as she had been when she had brushed shoulders with a young master at the market in her late 20s. After Yunlan finished correcting the last of his documents, he stood up and prepared to return to his quarters to rest. As soon as he opened the door to his study, he saw Madame Qin standing in the courtyard. Yunlan's footsteps paused. His face was solemn and emotionless, but his hand on the doorframe trembled slightly. "Master, long time no see. How are you?" Qin Jianmei bowed to him from afar. The next day in her cottage, Qin Jianmei applied the ointment she had concocted overnight on Yunruoyu's wound. Yunruoyu felt refreshed and comfortable, and the numbness, pain, and other unpleasant sensations disappeared in an instant. "Mother, where did you get this ointment?" Yunruoyu couldn't help but ask. "Master," Qin Jianmei replied coolly. "My father?" Yunruoyu's eyes widened. "My father actually gave me such a good ointment." "What?" Yunruoyu frowned and looked at her mother in disbelief. "Mother, you went to see my father?" Qin Jianmei nodded. Yunruoyu was so happy that she was about to jump up and down, but the sudden movement tugged at her wound and caused her to grimace in pain. "Mother, that's great. You're finally willing to see my father." Yunruoyu exclaimed happily. "Won't you come back to the cottage in the future? I'll have my mother to protect me from now on, and I won't have to look for Madame Min anymore." Qin Jianmei handed the 2 bottles of ointment to her daughter. "I've written down how to use this ointment. Do it twice a day and your wound will heal in less than 3 days." She sighed and continued, "It's just that the scar won't disappear completely, but that's already the best-case scenario." "Mother, aren't you going to help me apply the ointment?" Qin Jianmei reached out and caressed her daughter's face. "The bodhisattva's still waiting for me." Yunruoyu's eyes widened in disappointment. She slapped Madame Qin's hand away and pointed at the door. Leave now. I don't want to see you." Qin Jianmei still wanted to say something, but Yunruoyu had already covered her ears with her hands, and she could only stand up and leave. As she lifted the curtains, she couldn't help but turn around and say, Remember what I told you, don't get too close to Madame and leave now." Yunruoyu shook her head vehemently. Madame Qin sighed and walked out of the room. Yunruoyu listened as Madame Qin's footsteps grew further and further away. Yunruoyu sat on her bed, biting her lip as she thought bitterly, "You can't protect me, and you won't let me look for someone else? You just want to be a coward and you still want to take me with you?" "Vanilla." Yunruoyu called out to the door. "Prepare some clothes for me. I'm going to the Rippling Cottage to pay my respects to Mother." The Rippling Cottage was especially lively today. Because of the torrential rain the night before, the hot weather had improved somewhat. Madame Min had ordered a tea table to be set up by the peonies in the courtyard, and she invited Yun Ruoyao and Yi Qianying to enjoy tea together. As soon as the three of them sat down and took their first sip of tea, a maid called out, "Third miss, you're here." Chapter 90. Mother, Ruoyu is here to greet you. Yun Ruoyu's voice could be heard even before she entered the room. Madame and Yun Ruoyao and Yi Qianying glanced at each other, clearly surprised by Yun Ruoyu's arrival. Yi Qianying hadn't been present when Yun Ruoyu had been injured, but after hearing the maidservant's vivid descriptions, she felt as if she had seen it with her own eyes. How can I miss out on mother's tea? Yun Ruoyu smiled as she walked into the garden. She wore a light red blouse with golden threads, and her face was specially made up to hide the pale complexion that had been tormented during this period of time. Her strong spirit made her look like she was not injured or confined at all. "Ruoyu, come and sit here." Madame and hurriedly stood up to greet her, then ordered the maids to bring in more chairs and tea sets. Yun Ruoyu sat on a chair and leisurely took a sip of her tea. Her tone was somewhat aggrieved as she said, "Such good tea, but mother didn't invite me and secretly brought it to my sisters." As soon as Yun Ruoyu entered the courtyard, the three men's gazes lingered on her neck. The collar covered most of Yun Ruoyu's neck, but if one looked closely, one would be able to see a strange red patch of skin through the gaps in the collar. Could it be that Ruoyu had been traumatized and was acting abnormally? Yun Ruoyao couldn't help but wonder when she saw Yun Ruoyu's overly normal behavior. Yi Qianying, on the other hand, was sneering in her heart. She could still laugh after suffering such an injury. What a heartless girl. But then she remembered what had happened to her at the flower viewing party, and how she was forcing herself to smile. When she looked at Yun Ruoyu's smiling face again, she felt even more annoyed. "Ruoyu, are your injuries better?" Madame spoke up. "The old madam ordered you to be confined, so it wasn't convenient for me to visit you. Dr. Liu said that your injuries weren't life-threatening, so I was relieved. I just didn't expect you to recover so quickly." Madame was well aware of just how vicious the mundane world was. He'd thought that even if Yun Ruoyu didn't die from such an injury, she would at least lose a layer of skin, and wouldn't be able to see anyone for at least a year. He didn't expect that in less than a month, this girl would be full of energy again. She could not help but feel surprised. "Yes, much better." Yun Ruoyu picked up her teacup and took another sip. "Father gave me some medicine and Madame Qin gave me some ointment. In less than 3 days I'll be completely healed." "Father gave you the medicine?" Yun Ruoyao was a little shocked. Yun Ruoyu had been grounded by the Yun matriarch, and her injury had been hidden from the Yun matriarch and Yun Lan. Why would Yun Lan give her medicine? Madame Anne's knuckles turned white as she held the teacup in her hand, but she still smiled. "Your mother must have gone to plead on your behalf. Old master still loves you very much." She turned to Yun Ruoyu. "Madame Qin hasn't left the cottage in a long time, and I haven't seen her in a long time either. Why don't you invite her over for tea?" "Mother, there's no need." Yun Ruoyu's expression was dejected. "She's returned to her cottage. In this world she's probably closest to the Bodhisattva. If it weren't for the fact that I'm about to die, she wouldn't have been willing to leave that hall. Mother, do you think I'm her biological daughter?" Madame put down her teacup, her lips curling up imperceptibly before she quickly hid it. "That's just how my sister is, so don't blame her. Don't you still have me, your mother, and your 2 sisters?" "Yes." Yun Ruoyu nodded. "Fortunately I still have you, mother. Otherwise I'd be the most pitiful child in the world." "Sister, don't say that." Yi Qianying sighed. "I'm the one who's pitiful, but fortunately the Yun family took me in and aunt and my 2 sisters treat me well." As Yi Qianying spoke, she couldn't hold back her tears. Madame hurriedly stood up to comfort her, wiping her tears away with a handkerchief. "You're about to get married, so don't cry so easily." Madame Anne's expression was pained. "Remember, the Yun family will always be your mother's home." Yun Ruoyu hadn't attended the flower viewing party, but news of Yi Qianying's appearance there had spread far and wide. Naturally, Yun Ruoyu knew about it as well, but she hadn't expected that her brother would end up marrying Yi Qianying. She looked at Yi Qianying's tear-stained face, so delicate and adorable. When she thought of the scars on her own body, her heart was filled with all sorts of complicated emotions. Yun Ruoyu suppressed her jealousy and forced a smile. "I heard that you're about to marry the crown prince, sister. Congratulations." Yi Qianying knew that Yun Ruoyu had feelings for the crown prince. For some reason, when she saw Yun Ruoyu's desolation, she felt a strange sense of balance. Finally, there was someone who was unhappy with her. "Sister, you're too kind," she replied with a faint smile. Together, they sipped tea and admired the flowers. Although they each had their own thoughts, they seemed to be enjoying themselves. At first, Madame had been worried that Yun Ruoyu would hate her, but she wasn't worried anymore. First, the girl had grown up by her side and she was quite dependent on her. Second, even if she did hate her, Madame was confident that she could control her. Just then Xianxia placed her teacup on the table, crossed her arms, and swept her gaze across the three of them. Frowning, she began, "Aunt, during the flower viewing party, I discovered a huge secret that I haven't had a chance to tell you about. This secret might sound a little ridiculous, but I believe that my intuition is correct." When the three of them heard Xianxia's words, they immediately stopped sipping their tea and looked at her. "What secret?" "Sister Xianxia, don't keep us in suspense," Yun Ruoyu exclaimed. "That's right, Xianxia. While everyone's here, don't worry," Yun Ruoyao added. Xianxia's expression was very serious, and she subconsciously lowered her voice. "I suspect that Yun Ruoyan isn't the same Yun Ruoyan as before." The three of them didn't know how to react to this. "Sister Xianxia, what do you mean by that?" Yun Ruoyu asked. "If Yun Ruoyan isn't the same Yun Ruoyan as before, then who is she?" Yun Ruoyao asked. Madame, however, seemed to be deep in thought. "That girl really is different from before. She's much stronger than before." "Sister Ruoyao, Sister Ruoyu." Xianxia looked at Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu. "Do you remember, in the imperial territory, when Yun Ruoyan fought with a young master from the Yu kingdom and then killed him?" The three of them had kept this matter a secret, but Madame naturally wasn't an outsider. After all, she had known about it a long time ago. The two of them nodded, but they still didn't understand what Xianxia was referring to. "That day in the greenhouse, I suddenly felt that Yun Ruoyan's gaze toward me was very strange. It wasn't one of schadenfreude, nor was it one of indifference. Rather, it was the condescending gaze of a superior toward the weak. Her gaze was so intimidating that it was frightening. I suddenly recalled that in the imperial territory before young Master Wang died, he shouted at Yun Ruoyan that she wasn't human but a demon." As Xianxia recounted her story, Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu couldn't help but recall the scene in the imperial territory. When they thought of Yun Ruoyan's recent changes, they suddenly felt a chill run down their backs. "Xianxia." Madame sat up straight and looked at Xianxia. "Are you saying that Ruoyan is a demon in disguise?" Xianxia nodded, then shook her head. "To be more precise, I suspect that she's been possessed by a demon, or that she's been possessed by someone." Xianxia leaned forward and looked at the three of them. "Think about it. Other than these two possibilities, how else could she suddenly become so strong, so evil, and so difficult to deal with? That must be it." Yun Ruoyu stood up immediately. "No wonder she didn't want to drink the soup I gave her that day at the pavilion in the middle of the lake. She must have smelled the poison in the soup. And when she spilled the poisoned soup on me, she must have done it on purpose. She's a demon in disguise." She pressed her hands on the table and hatefully said, "Do you still remember the day when the crown prince came? I think she's a fox demon. No wonder she's always able to defeat those stronger than her." Yun Ruoyao calmed herself down, as if she had suddenly figured out something that had eluded her for a long time. In the imperial territory, she defeated Wang Kuang as a third-rank blade master. Then at the flower viewing party she defeated Rong Yuehong, a sixth-rank blade master. No normal person would be able to break through so quickly in such a short period of time. Furthermore, he didn't tell father that he had made such great progress in his cultivation. Instead he hid it. Madame slammed her palm onto the table. "There's definitely something fishy going on. Xianxing's suspicions might very well be true. In that case, let's report this to father and grandmother," Yun Ruoyu said hurriedly. "Let grandmother and father take her in." "Sister Ruoyu, you're being silly again," Yun Ruoyao said. "We've only heard of demons possessing humans, but we've never seen it with our own eyes. Without concrete evidence, not only will father and grandmother not believe us, they'll even blame us for disturbing them. Then what should we do?" Yun Ruoyu asked anxiously. "Are we just going to let this demon do as she pleases in the Yun household?" Everyone frowned. Madame seemed to have thought of something, and her eyes suddenly lit up. "I know of something that can make a demon appear." "What is it?" Yun Ruoyu, and Xianxia asked in unison. "Realgar wine," Madame replied. "When I was young, I've seen Taoists catch demons. As soon as a low-level demon touches Realgar wine, it'll immediately reveal its true form." Yun Ruoyu's eyes also lit up. "Mother, do you mean to splash Realgar wine on her when she's not paying attention?" "That's easy." Madame shook her head. "According to what you've said, this demon's cultivation is quite high. Just using Realgar wine on her won't be enough. We'll have to think of a way to make her drink it." Yun Ruoyao said awkwardly, but she's always been cautious. Even with so many of us around, we couldn't make her drink that bowl of soup. How can we make her drink realgar wine now? Madame Min picked up her teacup and leaned back in her chair. She used the lid of the teacup to skim the tea leaves that had floated up from the surface, causing the lid to squeak. As her 3 daughters stared at her, she took a sip of tea and finally said, "It looks like the clue I've been hiding for so long has finally come in handy." Chapter 91. Naturally, Yun Ruoyan was oblivious to Madame An's plot. She was still immersed in her own cultivation. After greeting the Yun matriarch early in the morning, Yun Ruoyan went to the Lin manor. Lin Zainan, Lin Qingqian and Lin Qingxue were already waiting for Yun Ruoyan's arrival. As soon as Yun Ruoyan entered, she began the ceremony. Lin Zainan sat at the head of the table with Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingqian standing on either side of him. Yun Ruoyan knelt down and kowtowed 3 times. "Disciple greets master." Lin Zainan repeatedly said, "Good disciple, quickly get up." His face was smiling so widely that his eyes couldn't be seen. Yun Ruoyan stood up, took a cup of wine from Lin Qingqian, and offered it to Lin Zainan, who drained it in one gulp. "Good girl? Good girl, from now on you're not only my granddaughter, but you're also the first disciple of the Lin family to come from another family in 100 years. You're also my last disciple." Lin Zainan stroked his white beard, his tone proud. He was very pleased with this disciple of his. "Sister Ruoyan, no." Lin Qingxue clasped her hands behind her back mischievously. "Junior Ruoyan, hurry up and greet your senior." Yun Ruoyan smiled as she walked up to her and reached out to pinch her chubby cheeks. "Sister Ruoyan, be gentle." Lin Qingxue cried out in pain. The Lin family's pillbox, which had been lonely for so long, was suddenly filled with laughter. After the ceremony, Lin Qingqian and Lin Qingxue were sent off by Lin Zainan to do their homework, and Yun Ruoyan was about to begin her first pill-making lesson. Lin Zainan placed the herbs he had prepared on the table and pointed at one of them. "What's this?" Yesterday, Lin Zainan had given Yun Ruoyan a secret manual for her to memorize. Today's first lesson was to test her proficiency. Yun Ruoyan saw that the herb was a faint red, and its branches were dotted with tiny blue flowers. It was something she had seen in the imperial territory. "This is stargrass and it can be used to refine pills that heal internal injuries," Yun Ruoyan replied. Lin Zainan nodded in satisfaction, then asked her about a few other herbs, which Yun Ruoyan answered with familiarity. "Very good, then let's start concocting the medicine. Watch me do it once." As Lin Zainan spoke, he led her to a furnace in the middle of the pill-making chambers. The furnace was about half the height of a grown man, and its bronze luster could reflect a person's shadow. There were 4 lifelike qilin carvings around the furnace. Because he had been refining medicine for a long time, he could smell the medicinal fragrance coming from the furnace from far away. This cauldron has been passed down in our Yun family for 3 generations. Although it can't be considered a top-grade cauldron, it has a spiritual nature, and its effect in refining medicine is definitely not inferior to that of a high-grade cauldron, Lin Zainan explained. Yun Ruoyan reached out to touch the furnace, feeling the warmth emanating from it. Ever since she was a child, she had watched her maternal grandfather sit in front of this furnace and refine medicine. She had never thought that there would be a day when she would use this furnace to refine medicine. Lin Zainan stood in front of the furnace, exuding the aura of a master. He spread out his arms and clasped them into a semicircle. A red spirit mist seeped out of his palms. Although his cultivation level had dropped, his decades of experience in alchemy had allowed his movements and operation to be as smooth as flowing water, pleasing to the eye. When the spirit mist formed a whirlwind in front of him, he pushed forward with his hands, and the whirlwind was instantly pushed into the furnace through the carvings on the furnace. With a loud boom, an orange flame burst forth from the furnace, and the 4 qilin beasts seemed to come to life, glaring and baring their teeth as if they were about to devour someone. The orange light of the flames painted Lin Zainan's white hair, beard and eyebrows with a fiery hue, making him look more like an immortal than a mortal. "Ruoyan, come here." Lin Zainan beckoned to Yun Ruoyan, who was standing to the side in a daze. "The furnace has a spiritual nature, and each of our flames has its own aura. Before using the furnace for the first time, we need to familiarize the furnace with our auras." At Lin Zainan's request, Yun Ruoyan cut her finger and dripped a drop of blood into the furnace. As if cheering, the orange flame surged upward. "It's done," Lin Zainan exclaimed. "Watch carefully. I'm going to be refining a low-rank pill, a darkened heavens pill." As Yun Ruoyan retreated, Lin Zainan stretched out a hand toward the furnace, and the stargrass flew into his palm. He pushed it forward and it floated above the furnace. The flames began to roast the herbs through the opening in the furnace, and Lin Zainan tossed in 3 or 4 batches of different types of herbs. Then he sat cross-legged in front of the furnace, stretched out his hands, and injected a fire-attuned spiritual mist into the furnace. By controlling the amount of spiritual mist, you'll be able to control the size of the flame within the furnace until the pill is complete. Lin Zainan's eyes were fixed on the spiritual flame and the floating herbs within the furnace. Pill making requires both comprehension and hard work, and you can't do without either. As the saying goes, the master can lead the way but the cultivator can't. Xuanhuan watched as the 4 herbs began to change in color and form under the heat of the spiritual fire. Along with the changes in the medicinal herbs, the spiritual fire in the medicinal furnace also fluctuated in size, sometimes turning scarlet and sometimes turning red. After about the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, the herbs slowly transformed into a viscous substance, then slowly fused together into a spherical shape. That spherical substance slowly rotated on top of the furnace, finally becoming a brownish-yellow pill about the size of a longan. A strong medicinal fragrance wafted out along with the final formation of the pill. Lin Zainan stretched out his hands, and the pill floated from the furnace into his palms. Without the spiritual mist, the spiritual flame within the furnace slowly died out, and the pill darkened once more. The darkened heavens pill is done. Lin Zainan smiled at Xuanhuan. Only then did Xuanhuan realize that Lin Zainan's ruddy complexion had turned somewhat pale, and although he was smiling he couldn't hide his exhaustion. "Grandfather." Xuanhuan's heart ached as she hurried forward to support him. "I'm getting old," Lin Zainan laughed. "Back in the day I didn't eat, drink or sleep for 3 days in a row to produce 32 low-grade spiritual pills and 4 mid-grade spiritual pills." When she thought of how Lin Zainan had dropped from a 5th-rank pillmaster to a 3rd-rank pillmaster for her sake, Xuanhuan's heart ached. After all, Lin Zainan had spent more than half his life cultivating to reach that level, and yet he was willing to give it up for Xuanhuan's sake. Xuanhuan felt that there was nothing she could do to repay him for his kindness. "Grandfather, in my heart you'll never grow old and you'll always be the best." Xuanhuan held onto Lin Zainan's arm. Once again Lin Zainan was grinning from ear to ear. In his heart, to have a descendant stronger than him inherit his legacy, and to be able to support the Lin family for 100 years after his death, was far more important than a mere 2 ranks of cultivation. Moreover, this descendant would be his own grandson. How could he not be happy? Xuanhuan helped Lin Zainan to the outside of the pill-making chambers and poured him a cup of tea. Lin Zainan only took a quick sip before hurriedly spreading out the yellow pill in his hand for Xuanhuan to see. Xuanhuan knew what a darkened heavens pill was. In the early stages of cultivation, it could help a cultivator quickly condense spiritual energy to become a 3rd-rank blade master. However, the cultivators who used the darkened heavens pill were often stuck at 5th rank, and it was difficult for them to advance any further. As a result, this low-grade spiritual pill was widely used by the guards and the army. Even on the Xuanhuan continent, it was in short supply. Lin Zainan explained to Xuanhuan that spiritual pills could be divided into 3 grades: low-grade, mid-grade and high-grade, according to the ingredients used, the spiritual energy they contained and their effects. Each grade could then be further divided into 3 grades: high-grade, high-grade and high-grade. "Look at this darkened heavens pill. It's shiny, round and fragrant." Lin Zainan placed the pill in front of Xuanhuan's eyes, teaching her how to judge the quality of a spiritual pill. You can tell the pillmaster's cultivation by looking at the spiritual pill. If the pillmaster's cultivation isn't high enough, and he tries to forcefully refine a high-grade pill, he'll definitely end up with a low-grade one. However, most of these cases end in failure. Xuanhuan took the pill from Lin Zainan's hands and placed it back into the pillbox. If spiritual pills were exposed to the air for too long, they'd easily lose their spiritual energy. "Did that Wang Meng want to buy your pills because he wanted to see your cultivation?" Xuanhuan asked as she closed the pillbox. Lin Zainan sat in his armchair, stroking his beard and frowning. "That Wang brat really is a rare pill-making genius, and I've heard a few rumors about him over the years. It is said that he has a special ability since he was young. He can use his sight, smell and touch to observe and analyze a pill, and then figure out the ingredients of the pill, the refining method and the heat used." Xuanhuan couldn't help but be a little shocked. Who would have such an ability? Wasn't that just a living pill-making manual? "I've heard that the kid's cultivation has already gone berserk," Lin Zainan said seriously. Lin Zainan couldn't help but say sternly, "Royan, although you're also talented, it won't be easy for you to defeat him. You'll have to put in a lot of effort. Xuanhuan looked at Lin Zainan, her expression equally serious. Grandfather, I won't let you down. Chapter 92. Lin Zainan wasn't in a hurry to have Xuanhuan start refining pills. After all, a newly condensed spiritual flame wasn't easy to control, and he wanted Xuanhuan to practice her control over it. Back in her cottage, Xuanhuan was cultivating in her room, while Peony and Xilan were embroidering pillows and gossiping in the yard. Sister Peony, what do you think our mistress's body will get damaged if she keeps cultivating like this all day? Xilan frowned as she rubbed a needle against her scalp. No, our mistress knows what she's doing. Peony lowered her head as she meticulously embroidered a phoenix orchid stamen. That day she had brought out quite a few designs for Xuanhuan to choose from, and Xuanhuan had immediately chosen the phoenix orchid. She remembered that the mistress hadn't liked phoenix orchids in the past, saying that they were too flashy and too seductive. Our mistress's taste is getting better and better. That phoenix orchid's the prettiest of all the designs. Xilan smiled. Peony's fingers paused for a moment, then she smiled as well. That's right, our mistress is getting better and better. Sister Peony, Sister Xilan. Just as the two of them were talking, a voice suddenly rang out from not far away. They looked up and saw Ling Lan cowering in a corner of the yard. Xuanhuan was practicing how to control her spiritual flame. There were two small red flames in each of her palms, and as she channeled the fire-attuned spiritual energy from her spiritual vortex into her palms, the two flames grew larger and larger until they looked like two blood lotuses blooming in her palms. Not only do you have to be able to control the size of your spiritual flame as you wish, you have to be able to change its color as you wish. Lin Zainan's teachings rang out in her ears. Red is almost devoid of heat, and it can't be used to refine pills on its own. However, it can be used to adjust the temperature of the pill, and it can also be used as a transition point between two types of flames. Xuanhuan's eyes were fixed on the red flames in her palms, trying to change them to orange. However, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't succeed. With a puff, the two flames were extinguished, and the fire-attuned spiritual energy in Xuanhuan's spiritual vortex had been depleted. Using the spirit fire really consumes a lot of spiritual power. No wonder grandfather didn't let me start refining the medicine immediately. Xuanhuan looked at her white spiritual vortex and muttered to herself, with my current cultivation, I'm afraid I won't even be able to ignite the furnace. It looks like I'll have to continue my training as a blade master. A blade master's cultivation was the foundation of all cultivation. Through cultivation, blade masters could strengthen and expand their spiritual vortex, as well as absorb spiritual energy faster and more efficiently. Because Xuanhuan had broken through too quickly, even though she was already a 7th-rank blade master, her spiritual C was relatively weak. If she didn't use the bracelet's power to fight a peak 7th-rank blade master like her, she would definitely be defeated due to exhaustion. Therefore, what she needed to do now was to continuously absorb the spiritual chi of heaven and earth and continuously refine the spiritual chi into spirit mist to strengthen her spiritual C. Having found a new goal, Xuanhuan didn't stop to rest. Instead, she immediately entered the bracelet's pocket dimension to cultivate. Just as she closed her eyes, there was a knock on the door. She said unhappily, "Didn't I tell you not to disturb me when I'm cultivating?" "Miss, Ling Lan says she has something urgent to report to you." Peony's voice came from outside the door. Xuanhuan sat on a stool, Ling Lan bowing in front of her. "Is this what Madame told you to put in my food?" Xuanhuan picked up a small flask of wine the size of her palm. "Do you know what this is?" "Miss, it smells like wine but I don't know exactly what it is," Ling Lan replied respectfully. "First Madame only instructed me to pour some into your favorite steamed pork when no one is looking." Xuanhuan suddenly laughed coldly. She even found out that I like braised pork? She really put in a lot of effort this time. Ling Lan didn't respond, only lowering her head even more. Seeing her trembling expression, Xuanhuan softened her tone. "Ling Lan, you've done well." She took out 10 taels of silver and placed it on the table. "This is your reward." Ling Lan raised her head and saw the silver, but she didn't take it. Instead, she knelt down and sobbed, "Miss, Ling Lan is unable to repay the kindness you have shown me. If Ling Lan takes this silver, my father will definitely scold me." Xuanhuan nodded. "Are you feeling better, sir?" "My father is much better." Ling Lan raised her head and wiped her tears with her sleeves. "Miss, thank you for finding a physician for my father and paying off my brother's gambling debts. I'll do anything to repay you." Although Ling Lan had initially been a spy planted by Madame N, Xuanhuan found that she didn't have a bad personality, and she guessed that she must have had some sort of hidden trouble. When she went to the Lin Manor, she had asked Lin Qingchen to help investigate. As expected, Ling Lan's family was in dire straits. Her 70-year-old father was ill, and she had no money to treat him. Her only brother was addicted to gambling and had accumulated a large debt. Xuanhuan had asked Lin Qingchen to treat Ling Lan's father's illness and pay off her brother's gambling debts. When Ling Lan learned of this, she was naturally very grateful. This was exactly the effect that Xuanhuan wanted. Although Madame N was a schemer, she was also cruel and merciless. Knowing that Ling Lan's family was in dire straits, she used it to threaten her. Every time, she would only give Ling Lan enough money to pay for emergencies, so that she wouldn't leave her grasp. Xuanhuan felt that Madame Anne's ability to win people's hearts was sometimes even inferior to Yi Qianying's. Get up. Xuanhuan reached out to help Ling Lan up. Here's some silver as payment for the information you gave me last time. Take it. As it turned out, it was Ling Lan who had informed Madame Anne of Xuanhuan's plan to poison Xuanhuan's soup. That day, Ling Lan had been on her way to Madame Anne's quarters to report on Xuanhuan's condition. As soon as Ling Lan returned, she immediately sought out Peony, who in turn informed Xuanhuan of what had transpired. Xuanhuan stuffed the silver into Ling Lan's hands, and Ling Lan trembled as she accepted the silver, thanking her profusely. She looked at the silver in her hands, a smile on her face and tears in her eyes. The Yun family servants had a fairly high monthly stipend of 5 copper coins. 10 taels of silver was equivalent to 2 years of her monthly stipend. Previously, Madame Anne had only given her 2 taels of silver at most, and Xuanhuan's image in Ling Lan's heart grew even more prominent. Xuanhuan looked at the girl's reverent gaze, and decided that she needed to add another layer of assurance. She then asked, I heard that your brother is an elementary scholar. Ling Lan hadn't expected Xuanhuan to ask about her brother, and she hesitated for a moment before replying, My brother is indeed a scholar, and a very talented one at that. However, because his family was poor, he couldn't afford the silver that the examiners demanded, and that's why he failed so many times. As a commoner on the Xianhuan continent, there were 2 paths that could change their lives. The first was through cultivation. As long as one broke through to become a 3rd-rank blade master, they could find a job as a guard, and it wouldn't be a problem for them to support their family. If they became a 5th-rank blade master, they could become a retainer of a large family, or even enter the imperial court to become a military official. However, most people didn't have the talent for cultivation, or if their talent was so poor that they had no hope of becoming a 3rd-rank blade master in their lifetime. As a result, they could only take the second path, the imperial examinations. Ling Lan's brother had taken the second path. However, corruption was rampant in the imperial court, and Emperor Li Xiu didn't place much importance on the imperial examinations or the selection of civil officials. As a result, the imperial examinations were rife with fraud. Because Ling Lan's brother couldn't afford the silver required by the examiners, despite his talent, he failed the imperial examinations time and time again. After a few failures, he was so deeply affected that he became addicted to gambling. Lin Qingchen had recounted all of this to her. Lin Qingchen had said that Ling Lan's brother was rather generous, but he was too depressed. Now that he was bored at home, it was likely that he wouldn't be able to restrain himself from gambling. Xuanhuan walked up to her desk, wrote a note, and handed it to Ling Lan. Have your brother take this note to the Lin family's apothecary in the city, and they'll give him a job. Miss, what did you say? Ling Lan stared at Xuanhuan, her eyes wide. She couldn't believe her own ears and eyes. Her mistress was actually telling her brother to go to the Lin family's apothecary? The apothecary was opened by my grandfather's family, and now it's managed by my cousin, the girl who went to your house to treat your father's illness last time. Xuanhuan was amused by her dazed expression. Ling Lan immediately thought of Lin Qingchen. That day, someone from the casino had come to collect a debt, threatening to burn down her family's house. Just then, a beautiful girl had appeared, not only paying her family's debt, but also treating her father's illness. In Ling Lan's heart, both Lin Qingchen and Xuanhuan were like bodhisattvas. Have your brother hand this note to Miss Lin. She'll definitely accept him, Xuanhuan instructed. Ling Lan trembled as she held the silver ingot in one hand and the note from Xuanhuan's hand with the other. She was so stunned that her soul seemed to have flown out of her body. She had never imagined that Xuanhuan would solve the 2 problems that had been weighing down on her head and making it hard for her to breathe. With money, the family's days would be much better. Even if her brother had a job, he would still be with her. For some reason, Ling Lan was certain that her brother would quit gambling this time, and her bitter days would finally come to an end. With a thud, Ling Lan knelt in front of Yun Ruoyan and kowtowed to her. "Miss, if there's anything you need me to do in the future, I'll do my best." Yun Ruoyan nodded in satisfaction, then helped Ling Lan up. After Ling Lan left, Yun Ruoyan casually took the small bottle in her hand, uncorked it and sniffed it. A strange odor immediately entered her nostrils. Achoo! Yun Ruoyan sneezed fiercely. "What the hell is that?" Chapter 93. Yun Ruoyan frowned. She placed the bottle in a corner of the room and ignored it. Instead, she focused on cultivating. Most of Yun Ruoyan's energy was focused on her cultivation, and the tricks that Madame N and her three sisters were up to weren't enough to distract her. After her rebirth, Yun Ruoyan was incomparably clear about her goals. In her past life, she had been short-sighted, weak, and useless. She had despised herself in the eyes of others. Whenever she met a man who was willing to give her the slightest bit of attention, she would lose her mind and give all her passion and hope to someone else. Occasionally, when Yun Ruoyan reflected on her past life, she realized that she hadn't truly loved Pei Zio at the time. Rather, she had viewed him as the only way to escape from the Yun family and her own miserable fate. The weaker she was, the more she couldn't leave him. But that wasn't love, but a kind of helpless, morbid dependence. At the time, all she could see was Pei Zio. For him, she was willing to abandon her family and herself. But when she escaped from the Yun family and entered the Pei family, she had fallen from a tiger's den into a wolf's den, into a bottomless abyss. In this life, she wanted to become stronger. She wanted to use her own strength to protect herself and those who treated her well. She wanted to rely on herself to pave a path out of the Yun family. She wanted to pave a bridge to the wider world for herself. As for Madame and Yun Ruoyao, Yun Ruoyu, Yi Qianying, and even Pei Zio, they would all be insignificant passers-by in Yun Ruoyan's dazzling life. If they didn't provoke her, she'd let them have their peace for a few days. If any of them came looking for trouble, she'd treat it as a diversion from her boring cultivation and fight them. "Miss, what present are you preparing for the Yun matriarch's birthday?" Peony asked as she combed Yun Ruoyan's hair in front of her dressing table. In a few days it would be the Yun matriarch's 80th birthday, and the Yun manor would be especially busy. At 50, one knew their destiny, at 70 it was rare, and at 80 it was extremely old. On the Xuanhuan continent, these 3 birthdays were extremely important. Given the Yun matriarch's esteemed status in the Yun family, it was only natural that they would hold a grand celebration. "I don't know. I haven't decided yet." As she looked at herself in the mirror, the image of a man appeared in her mind. The man was about 17 or 18 years old, tall and burly, with a delicate face. When he smiled, he bore an 80% resemblance to Yun Ruoyan. When he wasn't smiling, he looked especially serious. Under his thick black eyebrows, his eyes were like 2 deep and serene ancient wells. This was a characteristic he had inherited from Yun Lan. This youth was none other than Yun Ruoyan's brother, Yun Maxiao. Last year, during Madame Ruoyan's birthday, Miss Ruoyan gave her a jade ruby as a birthday gift, but Miss Ruoyan intentionally broke it when she bumped into you, Peony explained as she combed Yun Ruoyan's hair. "Of all the things the madam left behind, there's only a pair of glazed jade bracelets inlaid with gold. But the design aren't suitable for a birthday present." Peony frowned. Lin Yueme had left quite a few treasures for Yun Ruoyan after her death, but after so many years of selling and gifting, there wasn't much left. By the time Yun Ruoyan entered Kongming Academy, her expenses would only increase, and what little money she had left would likely be far from enough. In a short period of time, Peony was struggling to keep up with her finances. "Peony," Yun Ruoyan suddenly called out to her in the mirror. "Do you think my brother will come back this time?" "Young master?" Peony paused for a moment before resuming her movements. Now that the world is at peace, the young master should be back by now. But the day after tomorrow is the old madam's birthday, and I haven't heard any news at all. "Miss, why don't you go ask Madame Ruoyan about it?" Yun Maxiao was Lin Yueme and Yun Lan's first child, and Yun Ruoyan's biological brother. He had entered the army before Yun Ruoyan could even remember, and it had been 10 years since then. The first time Yun Ruoyan had seen Yun Maxiao was 3 years ago, when he had returned to report on his duties. At that time, Yun Ruoyan hadn't yet been kicked out of the family academy. However, her cultivation had already begun to stagnate. Because she had lost so many matches in the academy's internal competitions, she had been ridiculed, and she had hidden away to cry. Peony had told Yun Maxiao about this, and those who had ridiculed her were all taught a harsh lesson by Yun Maxiao. Yun Maxiao had even comforted Yun Ruoyan, telling her that even if she lost her talent, her brother would always protect her. That was the first time Yun Ruoyan had felt the warmth of family, but it was short-lived. Yun Maxiao had quickly left. Soon after, she had been kicked out of the family academy. The second time Yun Ruoyan had seen Yun Maxiao was when she had married Pei Zio. Yun Maxiao had rushed back from the army camp and personally accompanied Yun Ruoyan to the Pei Manor on horseback. Yun Ruoyan still remembered what Yun Maxiao had said to Pei Zio outside the palanquin. "If you dare mistreat my sister, I'll cut you into pieces and raze the entire Pei family to the ground." The next day Yun Maxiao had left the capital and rushed back to the army camp. However, that parting had been a matter of life and death. On his way back to the camp, Yun Maxiao had been robbed by bandits. By the time Yun Ruoyan saw her brother again, he had already been reduced to a mangled corpse. "Miss, what's wrong? Did I hurt you?" Peony had finished tying up Yun Ruoyan's hair and was about to take a good look at her handiwork in the mirror when she saw Yun Ruoyan's tears streaming down her face. "I'm fine." Yun Ruoyan wiped her tears with her sleeves. "The wind and sand got in my eyes." "Ah." Peony turned to look out the window. Where had the wind and sand come from? Yun Ruoyan looked at herself in the mirror and smiled. "It's not too late." Within the Yun matriarch's quarters, Yun Ruoyan was playing cards with the Yun matriarch, a game she had recently become addicted to. I can't afford it again." Yun Ruoyan's face was bitter as she placed the remaining cards on the table. "I've lost again. Grandmother, can't you let me win a little? My pitiful monthly stipend has all gone into your pocket these past few days." The Yun matriarch's wrinkled face bloomed with laughter. "I'm willing to admit defeat. Then I won't play anymore." Yun Ruoyan pretended to be angry. "Grandmother, you're too good. I'll keep losing." The Yun matriarch was amused by her innocent demeanor. "Mother, what's making you so happy?" First Madame An walked in at this time. She heard the Yun matriarch's laughter as soon as she entered the room. A maid lifted the curtains for her and she asked as soon as she entered. When she turned to look at Yun Ruoyan, her expression couldn't help but change. However, she quickly put on a smile and greeted Yun Ruoyan. "Ruoyan, you're here too. No wonder you're smiling so happily." "That's right, Ruoyan is the apple of my eye." The Yun matriarch didn't hide her fondness for Yun Ruoyan at all. "Of all the servants, only Ruoyan has the patience to play cards with me." The Yun matriarch couldn't help but smile sheepishly. "Ruoyu and Ruoyao have been teaching the new students of the family academy these past few days. Xianxia's about to get married, and she's been busy making the wedding dress with the seamstress." The Yun matriarch's gaze landed on Yun Ruoyan as she smiled. "Of all the servants, Ruoyan is the only one with the most free time. It's only right that she spend more time with the old lady." The Yun matriarch's meaning was too obvious. Wasn't she implying that Yun Ruoyan had nothing better to do? However, Yun Ruoyan didn't get angry at all. Instead, she smiled back. "Mother, you're right. In my heart, spending time with grandmother is the most important thing." The Yun matriarch didn't say anything, but she chuckled. Yun Ruoyan's words had struck a chord with her. "Ruoyan really is a filial child." Madame An laughed dryly. Yun Ruoyan picked up a walnut from the fruit box, smashed it open with a small hammer, removed the kernel, and carefully cleaned up the debris before handing it to the Yun matriarch. "Grandmother, here you go." The Yun matriarch placed the walnut in her mouth and chewed on it. As she ate, she casually asked Madame An, "Has Xianxia's marriage been decided?" "It's been decided. It'll be at the end of next month." "The 28th of the 8th month is an auspicious date, suitable for marriage," Madame An replied respectfully. Madame An replied respectfully, but her gaze occasionally drifted to Yun Ruoyan. This pair of old and young, one peeling walnuts and the other eating, seemed to have a tacit understanding of one another. It seemed that this lass had come to the Yun matriarch's residence quite often to please her. Unfortunately, her maidservants couldn't control their temper, so Xianxia could still pretend to sit there for an hour. Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu, on the other hand, complained that the Yun matriarch's residence was too old, and that they wouldn't have come unless it was absolutely necessary. The Yun matriarch ate 3 walnuts in a row and still wanted to stretch out her hand, but Yun Ruoyan refused. "Grandmother, you mustn't be greedy." Yun Ruoyan poured a cup of tea and handed it to the Yun matriarch. "These walnuts are greasy, so have some tea to wash them away. If you'd like some more, I'll peel them for you later." The Yun matriarch took the tea and took a sip before turning to Madame An. Kongming Academy's about to open at the end of next month, right? Has the enrollment list been released yet? The list hasn't been released yet, but the scions of the various families are all aware of it. The list is just a formality, Madam An replied. Kongming Academy opens in the middle of September, not long after Qianying's marriage to the Crown Prince's manor. She'll be able to enter the academy together with the Crown Prince, who's 2 grades above them. After answering the Yun Matriarch's questions, Madam An began reporting to the Yun Matriarch about the details of the birthday banquet, as well as the guest list. The Yun Matriarch usually didn't bother with the affairs of the manor, but Yunlan was particularly concerned about this birthday banquet. Madam An was still afraid that she wouldn't be considerate enough, so she reported every detail to the Yun Matriarch. If Yunlan wasn't satisfied, she could use the Yun Matriarch as a shield. Others didn't know of Madam An's schemes, and they simply thought that she was being considerate and filial. As Xuanhuan listened to Madam An's list of guests, she frowned. The Crown Prince Li Qianxiao, the Pei father and son Pei Xiong and Pei Zio, the head of the Li family Li Tianling, the slaughtering king, Li Mo. Truly, all those who were supposed to be here had been invited. Chapter 94. After her report, Madam An took her leave. As she walked into the courtyard, she heard the laughter of an old man and a young girl, and she couldn't help but stop in her tracks. She really is a demon with a few tricks up her sleeves. Even the shrewd old mistress has been fooled by her. Just looking at her, I can't help but exude such a demonic aura. She used to be such a good, sensible child. How did she end up being targeted by a demon? We can't let this demon do as she pleases in the Yun household. Madam An sighed, feeling sorry for Xuanhuan. I wonder how much damage the demon has done to her soul. Even if she were to be expelled, she'd probably be reduced to an idiot. But if that's the case, at least I won't have to worry about her anymore. Madam, what's the matter? Hong Yu, Madam An's maid, asked worriedly. She looked at Madam An, who had suddenly stopped in her tracks and seemed to be in a daze. Then a strange smile appeared on her lips. Madam An snapped out of her reverie, waved her hand and walked out of her cottage. As she walked, she wondered, that girl's been drinking that realgar wine for 7 or 8 days now. Why hasn't she reacted at all? As she walked, Madam An suddenly turned around and called out to Hong Yu, "Call Ling Lan over immediately. I want to ask her some questions." Not long after Madam An left, Xuanhuan noticed that the Yun Matriarch was beginning to feel sleepy, so she stood up and excused herself. The Yun Matriarch had Xiaolan take out a small sandalwood box from a cupboard and hand it to Xuanhuan. She opened the box in front of Xuanhuan, revealing a few jewels and a few taels of silver. Although the jewels weren't as valuable as the ones Lin Yueme had left her, they were still of high quality. There were roughly 100 taels of silver in total, not much but not a small sum either. Although the Lin family had some money, Xuanhuan wouldn't ask for it unless it was absolutely necessary. This 100 taels of silver would be just enough to alleviate her current tight financial situation. Royan, the Yun Matriarch sighed. The Yun Matriarch sighed with emotion and said, "All these years, grandmother hasn't given you anything. Take these things and buy yourself a few sets of good clothes." Xuanhuan didn't stand on ceremony. She hugged the Yun Matriarch's arm and teased her until she couldn't stop giggling. Then she picked up the box and prepared to leave. When she walked to the door and lifted the curtain, she seemed to suddenly think of something. She turned around and asked, "Grandmother, will my brother come back to celebrate your birthday?" The Yun Matriarch was lying on a soft couch, and Xiaolan was covering her with a thin blanket. When she heard Xuanhuan's voice, she opened her eyes slightly. "I've already had your father send a letter to the barracks, but there's still no reply." "Oh, I see." Xuanhuan's tone turned a little forlorn, but she quickly turned cheerful again. "Grandmother, rest well. When I'm free tomorrow, I'll come play cards with you." Xiaolan walked Xuanhuan out of the room and was about to return to the Yun Matriarch when Xuanhuan stopped her. "Sister Xiaolan." Xuanhuan smiled as she held Xiaolan's hand. Xiaolan looked at Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan's hair was as black as the clouds, and her eyes were as bright as the stars. She wore a peach blossom veil, but her face was even more delicate than a peach blossom. She was truly so beautiful that she couldn't help but be delighted. "Miss Royan, do you have any other instructions?" Xuanhuan took out a green jade bracelet from her sleeve and put it on Xiaolan's wrist. "Miss, I can't accept this." Xiaolan hurriedly retreated, but Xuanhuan held her hand. "This is a gift for you. The phoenix flower you drew for me is very beautiful and I like it very much. Xilan has already embroidered it on my pillow, and I'd like a smaller version of the same design to embroider on my shoes. Sister Xiaolan, do you have time to draw it for me?" Since it was a gift for her, Xiaolan couldn't refuse. She quickly agreed that she would draw it for her when she was free. After entering the room, Xiaolan showed the bracelet to the Yun matriarch, who nodded slightly. Since it's for you, you should keep it. This child has been holding back for so long, but in the end he still asked. Mrs. Liu closed her eyes, but she was not as sleepy as before. Isn't Master a little too harsh on young Master and Miss Ruoyan, forbidding them from communicating with each other? Xiaolan asked. Miss Ruoyan is quite pitiful. She clearly misses her brother, but she doesn't dare to ask him directly. She beat around the bush for a long time before finally asking him. Madam, didn't you see Miss Ruoyan's disappointed expression when you said that there was no news? It was heartbreaking. The Yun matriarch sighed. Has a stubborn temper and he's extremely protective of Ruoyan. 3 years ago when he came back to report on his duties, he beat up his fourth uncle's son, Moyuan, in order to protect Ruoyan. If he finds out that Ruoyan has been expelled from the academy, he'll surely make a scene. Then won't young Master find out about Miss Ruoyan's expulsion when he returns? Xiaolan asked worriedly. Things are different now. A faint smile appeared on the Yun matriarch's aged face. Ruoyan worked hard and earned the right to enter Kongming Academy with her own abilities. Even if Xiao returns, given Ruoyan's intelligence, I doubt she'll complain to him. Back in the rippling courtyard, Hongyu brought Ling Lan into the inner room. Madam and was already growing impatient. What took you so long? She asked coldly. Ling Lan was still trembling. Madam? Shilan dragged me into the main kitchen, saying that she'd make some soup for Miss Ruoyan while the kitchen maids were on their lunch break. She had me light a fire for her, and it took me almost an hour before I was free. Madam Anne glanced at Hongyu, who nodded slightly. Only then did Madam Anne's expression improve. Did you put anything I gave you in the soup? Yes, Ling Lan replied, her head lowered. Whenever I have the chance, I'll put some into Miss Ruoyan's food. But it smells of alcohol, and Ling Lan doesn't dare to put too much at a time. Madam Anne nodded. Just keep doing it like this. You can go back now. By this time, Ling Lan was so nervous that her heart was about to leap out of her chest. This was the first time she'd ever lied to Madam, and fortunately, she'd always given off the impression that she was afraid of everything, so she didn't have to hide anything. Hearing that Madam Anne wanted her to go back, Ling Lan heaved a sigh of relief. She nodded and was about to leave when Madam Anne called her back. Here, this is your reward. Madam Anne handed a small piece of silver to Hongyu, who in turn handed it to Ling Lan. As long as you do your job well, Madam Anne won't mistreat you, Hongyu said. Ling Lan gratefully accepted the silver and bowed profusely. Only then did Madam Anne wave her hand in satisfaction, indicating that she could leave. In the courtyard of her cottage, Peony and Shilan were busy sewing. Ling Lan held a handkerchief in her hand as she pretended to sit on a bamboo chair. Mimicking Madam Anne, she said, "How's life in the Tinglan residence lately? You have to keep a close eye on them lest they cause any trouble. Also, don't let them discover you." Ahem. Ling Lan coughed a couple of times and changed her sitting position. She raised her arm and spread out her palm. Here, this is your reward. Peony and Shilan couldn't help but burst out laughing. Instead, they rubbed their stomachs and laughed so hard that they couldn't catch their breath. Well done, Ling Lan. Shilan clutched her stomach and pointed at Ling Lan with a trembling finger. I thought you were an honest girl, but you're even more mischievous than I am. That's enough. Peony smiled at Shilan. It's all because of your bad influence. Just then Yun Ruoyan walked into the courtyard with the box in her arms. When she saw the three maids laughing as if they'd gone mad, she was a little confused. What's the matter? Why were you laughing so hard? Tell me about it, Miss Yun. Shilan immediately jumped up from the stool and repeated what Lily of the Valley had done just now. As expected, Yun Ruoyan was also amused. She looked toward Ling Lan. Ling Lan had long since stood up from her bamboo chair and was standing respectfully by the side, her head bowed and her face bright red. Suddenly, Ling Lan raised her head and fished out a piece of silver from her pocket. Miss, this is a reward from Madam Anne. Yun Ruoyan's gaze moved from the silver in Ling Lan's hand to Ling Lan. The Yun family's maids all had uniforms corresponding to their rank, and Ling Lan was a third-rank maid. She wore a sackcloth, but third-rank maids had to buy their own shoes. Ling Lan's shoes had already been patched up quite a few times. Keep it for yourself. Buy yourself a good pair of shoes, Yun Ruoyan said. Miss Yun was concerned about her shoes? Ling Lan's heart warmed and she almost teared up. Back in Yun Ruoyao's cottage, Madam and Yun Ruoyao, and the others had gathered once more. We really can't let this demon live, Madam Anne said. Even Madam Anne is bewitched by her. Xianxia continued, first the crown prince, then madam and then father. Once everyone's bewitched by her, the entire Yun family will fall into her hands. Then what should we do? Yun Ruoyu was a little flustered. Everyone present hated Yun Ruoyan, but only she and Xianxia hated her so much that they wanted to skin her alive. Mother, didn't you have someone drug her with realgar wine? Why isn't it working? Yun Ruoyao asked. This demon's cultivation is quite high. Ordinary realgar wine probably won't work on her, Madam An replied gravely. Then what should we do, mother? You have to think of something else. We can't let her rebel. Yun Ruoyu cried out. Madam An glanced sideways at her, clearly annoyed by her sister's incessant chatter. If ordinary realgar wine won't work. Madam An smiled sinisterly. In that case we'll have to use something big. Yun Ruoyu, and Xianxia couldn't help but look toward Madam An. What is it? Chapter 95. In the afternoon, a mysterious man arrived at Madame Rustling's courtyard. His face was ordinary and his hair was black and glossy. He was tall and thin and it was impossible to tell his age. He wore the robes of a Taoist priest, but he held a string of prayer beads in his hands. He referred to himself as a spiritual master. Spiritual master, please have some tea. Madam An respectfully took the teacup from one of her maids and handed it over personally. The spiritual master sat at the head of the table and accepted the teacup in a dignified manner. He took a sip, then asked, First madam, did you summon me this time because of the matter you mentioned last time? That's right. Madam An sat down to the side and frowned. The realgar wine you gave me last time didn't seem to have any effect on that demon. I'm thinking that perhaps its cultivation is too high for ordinary methods to work on it, so I'd like to invite you to see for yourself just what kind of demon it is. The spiritual master stroked his glossy beard and narrowed his eyes as he listened to Madam An's words. Speaking of this Taoist and Buddhist reverend, he was quite capable. Before Madam An was married, a red fox raised by a concubine with the surname Wang had become a demon. The fox shared the concubine's bed every night, absorbing her spiritual energy. As a result, the beautiful concubine had been reduced to a skeleton. Madam An's father was quite fond of the concubine, an old master, and sent for all the physicians in the county to examine her. In the end, however, they all came to the same conclusion. Her body was weak and she needed rest and nourishment. When the doctors were examining the patient, they couldn't help but look at Master An with a strange gaze. However, no one dared to open their mouths to advise this old man to be more restrained in the matters of the fish and the water. Despite all the nourishment, the concubine's health continued to deteriorate day by day. A beautiful woman like her had become so thin that she was almost out of shape. Rumors began to spread in the household that the concubine had been possessed by a demon, and that she had been tortured by it. Madam An still remembered how she had snuck over to see the concubine out of curiosity when no one else was around. The concubine lay on the bed, covered by a blanket. Her entire body was as flat as a sheet of paper, without a single protrusion. It had a skull-like head and its mouth was wide open, gasping for breath. Hiding behind the curtain, Madam An was frightened by concubine Wang's strange behavior. She was about to turn and leave when she suddenly saw a red fox leap in through the half-open window. Madam An recognized this red fox. It was the concubine's pet since it was a child. It was extremely delicate and didn't even let anyone touch it. Madam An watched as the red fox leapt onto the concubine's bed, then burrowed into the concubine's blankets through the gap in her neck. There was a small bump on the flat blanket, and that bump kept moving downwards. Then concubine Wang, who was like a dead person, suddenly moved. Her lifeless eyes suddenly lit up and her complexion changed from grayish-white to a strange flush. What was even more strange was that Wang Yinyang's mouth opened wide and intermittent moans came out. The voice sounded both pained and joyful. Unmarried, Madam An couldn't understand what was happening, but her heartbeat sped up and her face flushed. Just as Madam An was at a loss for what to do, a thunderous voice boomed from outside the door. How dare you harm others, demon? A Taoist priest leapt into the room, a flask of wine in one hand and a string of prayer beads in the other. His eyes shone brightly as he stared intently at the bed. When the fox heard the voice, it leapt out of the blankets and tried to escape. The Taoist priest was quick to react, tossing out the prayer beads in his hand and trapping the red fox in an instant. What a demon cultivating such a filthy technique! The spiritual master pointed at the fox with 2 fingers. The fox spoke in a magnetic male voice. It claimed that it wasn't a demon, but a spirit that had attained the Tao and could become an immortal in the future. As long as the spiritual master let it go, it would never forget his kindness when it became an immortal. On the Xuanhuan continent, humans weren't the only ones who could absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and the essence of the sun and moon to cultivate. As long as it was alive, it could cultivate. Once it developed a human-like intelligence, it would become a spirit and be able to take on a human form. It was even possible for it to ascend to immortality. Of course, these were all legends. Commoners didn't even have the chance to see true experts, let alone demons, spirits, and demons. The Red Fox emphasized that it was a spirit, not a demon, because there was a fundamental difference between demons and spirits. Demons were souls left behind after death. For some reason they attached themselves to a living object and continued to live. This object could be a human, but it could also be an animal. This kind of mutation produced by the Yin soul possession was known as a demon. Demons were different from spirits. They couldn't absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to cultivate. Instead, they had to use unorthodox methods to absorb spiritual energy from others to nourish themselves. All demons were cunning and vicious. In order to exterminate them, the Xuanhuan continent had given birth to a new profession: demon hunters. The spiritual master was a demon hunter. However, the spiritual master didn't listen to the fox's excuses. Instead, he stepped on its tail and poured the wine in his flask onto its body. Madame An heard the fox let out a pitiful cry, and gray smoke began to seep out of its nose and mouth. The smoke slowly condensed into the shape of a man, which the spiritual master absorbed into his prayer beads. This was the first and only time in Madame Anne's life that she had witnessed a human capture a demon. According to Madame Anne's description, "Your mistress doesn't seem like a demon." The spiritual master commented after hearing Madame Anne's description of xuanhuan. Madame Anne wasn't clear on the differences between demons, spirits, demons, and the common populace would often confuse them. She couldn't help but pause for a moment. Ever since Yi Qinying had suggested that xuanhuan was a demon, Madame An felt that xuanhuan seemed more and more like a demon. Based on xuanhuan's behavior over the past few days, Madame An was certain that xuanhuan was a demon. However, when the spiritual master suddenly said that xuanhuan didn't seem like a demon, she couldn't quite accept it. "That's impossible, spiritual master," Madame An hurriedly replied. "It's impossible for a person to change so much in such a short period of time. Her speech, demeanor, and the way she does things are completely like a different person. Furthermore, her cultivation progress is too incredible. Other than saying that she was possessed by a demon, I really can't think of any other explanation." "Madam." The spiritual master put down his teacup and twirled the prayer beads in his hand. "In the past year, has anyone in the Yun family died for no apparent reason?" "No." Although Madame An didn't understand why the spiritual master would suddenly ask such a question, she answered honestly. "In that case, have there been any strange murders in the capital or any strange illnesses?" Madame An thought for a moment. "My master is in charge of most matters in the capital, and I've never heard him mention any murders in the capital." "Then your mistress isn't a demon," the spiritual master confirmed. "Since she's not a demon, the realgar wine naturally won't have any effect on her." Then, Madame An found this hard to accept and she began to stutter. "However," the spiritual master continued. The Taoist master then spoke again. "From Madame's description, it seems that there is indeed something strange about this young lady. I wonder if Madame can arrange for me to meet this young lady." Within the pocket dimension of the silver bracelet, xuanhuan sat cross-legged, floating in the air with Xiao. Dense spiritual energy from the heavens and the earth was constantly being absorbed into xuanhuan's body. Then she used an energy-gathering technique to condense the spiritual energy into a spiritual vortex in her dantian. The amount of white spirit mist in his spiritual sea increased and became denser and denser. After a long time of condensation, the density and quantity of the spirit mist increased. Finally, xuanhuan could feel her spiritual vortex slowly expanding. As it did, xuanhuan's exhaustion grew more and more intense. "Mistress Xiao, mistress." Xiao called out. "Mistress, you've been cultivating for an entire day and night. If you don't rest now, your body won't be able to take it." Xuanhuan finally opened her eyes and stopped cultivating. "Xiao, I feel like my spiritual vortex has only just begun to expand," Xuanhuan muttered tiredly. "I really don't want to stop just like that." "Mistress, the spiritual energy in your spiritual vortex is being depleted too quickly. You need to accumulate enough spiritual energy before you can expand it further, so it's a little strenuous," Xiao replied. Expanding your spiritual vortex requires gradual progress. Mistress, the effects of your cultivation this time are already very good. Only then did Yun Ruoyan smile in relief. After finishing her cultivation, Yun Ruoyan had Peony and Xilan prepare a bath for her, so that she could relax and have a good sleep. Yun Ruoyan soaked in the steamy bathtub, closed her eyes, and used her mental energy to examine her spiritual vortex. This was one of her favorite activities during this period of time. Looking at the spiritual energy floating in her spiritual vortex, Yun Ruoyan felt a sense of security. On the other hand, if the amount and density of spiritual energy in her spiritual vortex weren't enough, she would grow anxious, and then cultivate as hard as she could until her spiritual vortex was full again. After Yun Ruoyan finished her bath, she prepared to take a nap before beginning her fire attunement cultivation. But as soon as she lay down, she heard two servants quarreling in the courtyard. She could not help but frown when she heard the voice of First Madame's maidservant, Hong Yu. "Peony, how dare you?" Hong Yu purposely raised her voice. "Madame N wants to see the second miss right now, and you dare to stop her from reporting to her?" "The first miss is currently resting and we can't disturb her," Peony replied, not backing down. "It's so early in the morning and the second miss is still asleep." Hong Yu pointed at Peony and Xilan, as if she were the head of the household. "If the old madam and the master were to find out that the second miss is so lazy, you servants would be in trouble as well. Hurry up and wake the second miss up." In the past, this Hong Yu had relied on her status as the first madam to cause trouble in Yun Ruoyan's quarters, and now she was still so ignorant as to provoke her. Xilan stood by the side, clenching her fists. She was about to slap Hong Yu twice, just as she had done to xianxia and xuanhuan. Just then the door opened and Yun Ruoyan walked out. Chapter 96. Yun Ruoyan walked out of the room, frowning unhappily. "Second miss, you're finally awake." Hong Yu was very pleased that she had finally managed to get Yun Ruoyan up. "Madame N asked me to invite you over to discuss something with her." Yun Ruoyan, however, treated Hong Yu as if she were invisible. She looked at Peony and Xilan. "Where did this bird come from so early in the morning? It's so noisy that I can't sleep in peace." Hong Yu's expression changed when she heard Yun Ruoyan refer to her as a bird, but she didn't dare argue. During this period of time she had heard from Madame N and the three misses that Yun Ruoyan wasn't human, and she had also heard from xianxia and xuanhuan that this second miss possessed a spell that caused heartache. As a result, she was still a little wary of Yun Ruoyan. Peony was about to reply when Xilan interrupted. "Miss, it's not a bird. Miss, it's not a good bird. Should we beat it out?" "Sure, go ahead," Yun Ruoyan replied coolly. Xilan rolled up her sleeves, picked up a broom from the corner of the room and was about to hit her. Hong Yu jumped back in fright. She hadn't been to her rooms in a long time, and she hadn't expected that not only Yun Ruoyan, but even Xilan and Peony seemed to have transformed into completely different people. Hong Yu thought that it was not only the second Mississippi. Perhaps everyone in the yard was possessed by a monster. "Xilan, you dare to hit me." Hong Yu was forced to the door of the courtyard by Xilan. She pointed at Xilan and bluffed. Xilan raised the broom in her hand. "So what if I hit you? Do you still think I'm that easy to bully?" Xilan swung the broom at Hong Yu, who screamed and jumped out of the courtyard. She hurriedly said that Madame N had something urgent to discuss with Yun Ruoyan in Madame N's quarters, and then ran away as fast as she could. As Xilan watched Hong Yu run away, she put her hands on her hips and laughed heartily. "Miss, it's been a long time since Madame N sent anyone to cause trouble." Peony's smile faded. "What's she up to this time?" Yun Ruoyan's lips curled into a cold smile. "Against someone like Madame N she couldn't afford to hide. If she wants to harm you, the best way is to confront her. Let's see who will be the unlucky one in the end. Peony, help me comb my hair. I'm going to the rippling courtyard." Yun Ruoyan turned and returned to her room. She arrived at Madame N's rippling courtyard, dressed in a light-colored blouse, a lotus petal veil and a simple hair bun. As soon as Yun Ruoyan entered the courtyard, she was greeted by a sea of red peonies, accentuating the grandeur of the manor. Madame N, who was also dressed in a peony red dress, walked up to greet her. "Ruoyan, you're here. Come in, the sun's going to get hotter soon." Madame N took Yun Ruoyan's hand and led her into the house. With a smile on her face, Yun Ruoyan obediently let her pull her into the house. "Mother, I heard from Hong Yu that you have something urgent to discuss with me. What is it?" Yun Ruoyan's expression was gentle and kind. If Madame N wanted to play the role of a loving mother, Yun Ruoyan wouldn't mind playing the part of an obedient daughter, waiting for her to reveal her true intentions. Madame An couldn't help but feel her scalp tingle when she heard Yun Ruoyan's obedient voice. When she saw Yun Ruoyan's gentle smile, she suddenly thought of the red fox from all those years ago. Madame An abruptly let go of Yun Ruoyan's hand, her expression a mixture of fear and panic. "Mother, what's the matter?" Yun Ruoyan asked curiously. I'm fine." Madame An ran her fingers through her hair, then sat down on a chair. "Ruoyan, you sit too." Yun Ruoyan nodded. Yun Ruoyan was a little puzzled. What was wrong with Madame An today? Why did she seem so distracted? Madame An had a maid serve tea and Yun Ruoyan took 2 sips. Seeing that Madame An still hadn't moved, she asked, "Mother, didn't you have something to discuss with me? I'm going to pay my respects to grandmother in a bit." "Oh, it's like that," Madame An began. Only then did Madame An begin. "When my nephew went out hunting, he caught a red-furred fox and he skinned it and gave it to me. I thought it was too bright, so I thought of you. If you'd like it, you can take it home and make it into a scarf or something." As she spoke, Madame An glanced at Yun Ruoyan, trying to see if there was anything amiss with her expression. Although the spiritual master had determined that Yun Ruoyan wasn't a demon, Madame An still felt as if Yun Ruoyan had been possessed by a fox demon. As a result, she had come up with this method to test the waters. Yun Ruoyan was even more puzzled. Why would she be gifting her a fox skin on such a hot summer day? "Mother, such a good thing should be left for Sister Ruoyao," Yun Ruoyan protested. "How could I accept it? Your eldest sister already has one." Madame An smiled. "Your 2 sisters have one as well, so you mustn't reject this fox skin. Otherwise, those who don't know will say that I'm biased." As she spoke, Madame An instructed Hong Yu to fetch the fox skin. Madame An took the fox skin from Hong Yu's hands and unfurled it. The fiery red fur was very shiny and beautiful, and it was actually of superior quality. "Ruoyan, take a look and see if you like it." Madame An looked at Yun Ruoyan with a probing gaze. Yun Ruoyan smiled. "It really is, but the color is too bright and it doesn't really suit me. Why don't I give it to Sister Qianying? I'm sure she'll like it." Of course. When Madame An saw that Yun Ruoyan was hesitant, she immediately smiled. "You look so good in that fiery red phoenix petal veil. When winter comes, add on a fiery red fox fur waistcoat, and you'll look like a phoenix from afar." Yun Ruoyan couldn't refuse Madame An's sincere offer, and she couldn't see anything strange about the fox skin, so she accepted it. As Yun Ruoyan left Madame An's cottage with the fox skin, she felt a little strange. What was wrong with Madame An today? It was as if she had taken the wrong medicine. Looking at the fox skin in her hand, she knew that there was something strange about it, and it would be best to show it to Qingqian. After Yun Ruoyan left, Madame An stood in the hall, deep in thought. The curtains to the inner chambers parted, and the spiritual master walked out. Well, did she accept the fox skin? The spiritual master asked. If she were possessed by a fox demon, she wouldn't have accepted the fox skin so readily. Moreover, she didn't seem the slightest bit alarmed when she saw the fox skin. Did I really suspect wrongly? Madame An muttered to herself. But she's clearly a completely different person now. Perhaps she's suddenly enlightened, or perhaps there's another reason. The spiritual master stroked his black beard, then turned to look at Madame An thoughtfully. Madam, is there another reason you're trying to get rid of this daughter of yours? Madame An hadn't expected the spiritual master to suddenly ask such a question, and she couldn't help but freeze. Ah! The spiritual master suddenly laughed strangely. Large families like you tend to have demons in your backyard, and I've caught quite a few of them myself, so of course I know a little about them. Regardless of whether the young miss is a demon or not, madam, you want to get rid of her, don't you? It took Madame An a long time to process what this Taoist priest of unknown age had just said. She restrained any expression that might betray her true thoughts. The Yun family has always been peaceful, and we can't allow that peace to be destroyed by a single person. So, Madame An looked at the spiritual master and said seriously and solemnly, even if I can't be sure what that girl is for the sake of the Yun family, I have to get rid of her. Madame An had finally made her intentions clear in a dignified manner. The spiritual master wore a solemn expression as he listened to Madame An's words, but when she was done, he broke into a strange cackle. Haha, since that's the case, this humble Taoist can lend Madame An a hand. However, I have a condition. As long as you succeed, money won't be a problem, Madame An hurriedly said. I don't lack money. The spiritual master shook his head. Madame An continued to ask, then what are your conditions? The spiritual master grinned, but his expression was as ugly as if he were about to cry. I want that girl. What do you want? Madame An couldn't believe her ears. You want that last Yun Ruoyan? Yes. What do you want her for? The spiritual master's smile faded, and he reverted to his previous dignified demeanor. Madam, there's no need to ask such questions. I'll help you get rid of her from the Yun family forever, but I'll have to take her with me. Madam An looked at the spiritual master, and suddenly, as if she had understood something, a trace of anger on her face. The lofty image of this spiritual master that she had built up in her heart from a young age had crumbled in an instant. It was said that there was no good man in the world, not even a spiritual master. Madam An was conflicted. No matter how much she hated Xuanhuan, she was still the young miss of the Yun family, the flesh and blood of her Yunlan. Even if she were to die, it would be a clean death. If she were to be defiled, Madam An couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. If you're not willing, then forget it. I'll take my leave now. The spiritual master stood up and prepared to leave. I agree. Madam An had finally won over the sliver of kindness in her heart. Xuanhuan couldn't be allowed to live any longer. All right. The spiritual master turned to look at Madam An, his heart filled with excitement. As soon as Xuanhuan entered the room, he had discovered a secret that was even greater than the heavens. This demon that Madam An had been talking about was actually a human furnace that only appeared once in 100 years. The spiritual master had never been particularly talented in cultivation. Apart from his cultivation as a blade master and his ability to capture demons, he had no other skills. After many years of cultivation and various techniques, he had managed to reach the peak of 9th rank as a blade master. One more breakthrough and he would reach the realm of a sword saint. But that was almost impossible. As far as he knew, no human on the Xuanhuan continent had ever been able to reach the realm of sword saint. He was destined to be stuck at the bottleneck of a 9th rank blade master. But today the spiritual master finally saw a glimmer of hope. Xuanhuan, a human furnace. As long as I can get my hands on her, I'll become one of the strongest human cultivators. The spiritual master's heart trembled with excitement. Chapter 97. After leaving the Yun matriarch's cottage, Xuanhuan went straight to the Yun matriarch's cottage to play a game of cards. Before she left, Xiaolan walked her out. Sister Xiaolan, the flowers you had someone send over yesterday were quite unique and I really like them, Xuanhuan whispered to Xiaolan as she walked out. The Yun matriarch had already lain down in her room, and Xiaolan turned around to look at her. I'm glad you like them, Second Mississippi. They're just small tricks. Sister Xiaolan, don't be so humble. You're the most talented girl in our backyard, Xuanhuan praised her sincerely. Xiaolan was an old servant of the Yun matriarchs, and she was one of the Yun family's daughters. What was rare was that Xiaolan wasn't like Vanilla Hongyu, and the others who liked to bully others and consider everyone beneath them. She was generous, intelligent, and skilled in embroidery, tea, and cooking. She was someone the Yun matriarch couldn't live without. Unfortunately, Xuanhuan hadn't had much interaction with her in her past life. Sister Xiaolan, you don't have to be so humble, Xuanhuan continued. Xilan is also quite skilled with her hands, but it's a pity that she doesn't have a good teacher to teach her. If you're free, Sister Xiaolan, I'd be delighted if you could come to my cottage and help me teach her. Xiaolan had always liked Xilan, and had taught her quite a few things in private. Hearing Xuanhuan's words, she felt a little awkward. The Yun matriarch can't do without me, but she'll be taking a long nap at noon. You can have Xilan come find me. In that case, I'll thank you on Xilan's behalf. Xuanhuan happily grabbed Xilan's hand. On her fair wrist was the green jade bracelet that she had given her, and it was a beautiful sight. This bracelet had been left behind by Lin Yueme, and it was considered to be above average among the jewelry she had left for Xuanhuan. When Xuanhuan had asked Peony for it, the girl had been quite reluctant to part with it, saying that there wouldn't be much left of the Yun matriarch's belongings. To tell the truth, Xuanhuan had been a little reluctant to part with it. Lin Yueme's belongings weren't just treasures, they were also a form of remembrance. But at this moment, Xuanhuan felt that this bracelet was far more meaningful in the hands of a good person than in the box. Her longing for Lin Yueme would not lessen because of the number of things she left behind. She would bury her longing for her mother deep in her heart until she found the culprit who poisoned her. Just as she was about to leave, Xiaolan called out to her from behind. Second Mississippi. Xuanhuan turned back and smiled at Xiaolan, waiting for her to continue. Xiaolan stepped forward and said in a low voice, "There's news about young master." Xuanhuan's eyes brightened, and the smile on her face deepened. She tried to suppress the excitement in her heart. Sister Xiaolan, my brother? Xuanhuan grabbed Xiaolan's hand, unable to continue. The news from the military camp said that the first young master has been granted leave, but he still doesn't have much time to rush home. I don't know if he can make it back before old Madam's birthday. To others, Yun Ruoyan hadn't seen Yun Maxiao in 3 years, but to Yun Ruoyan, it wasn't as simple as 3 years. Yun Maxiao's last concrete memory was of her wedding to Pei Zio in her past life, when he rushed back from the military camp to send her off. The last time she saw him was at Yun Maxiao's funeral, and the two siblings were separated forever. But now Yun Ruoyan could see Yun Maxiao again, alive and well, a brother who loved her dearly. How could she not be overjoyed and excited? Thank you, Xiaolan. Yun Ruoyan thanked her from the bottom of her heart. After leaving Yun Ruoyan's cottage, Yun Ruoyan hurried to the Lin Manor to tell Lin Zainan that Yun Maxiao was returning. Lin Zainan was naturally overjoyed. He'd only held this grandson of his when he was very young. At that time, Lin Zainan was busy managing the Lin family, traveling all over the continent, and hadn't had many opportunities to interact with Yun Maxiao. By the time he finally had some free time, Yun Maxiao had been stationed in the army for a long time, and the two of them hadn't seen each other at all. That's wonderful. Lin Zainan stroked his beard happily, then sighed. I wonder if Xiao'll be able to stay at home for a few more days this time. When he came back 3 years ago, I wasn't there. Now, as his grandfather, I can only remember his appearance as a baby. I'm ashamed. I remember. Lin Qingxue hurriedly exclaimed. 3 years ago, when cousin came to my house, he brought me a lot of good food. Lin Qingchen laughed. You probably only remember the good food, but you must have forgotten what cousin looks like. Of course not, Lin Qingxue retorted. He's so tall, even taller than you, grandfather. Lin Qingxue gestured with her hand. He's a little serious when he's not smiling, but he's very cute when he does. Oh. Lin Qingchen pretended to be surprised. I didn't expect you to remember him so well. 3 years ago, Lin Qingchen hadn't even been 10, and yet she could remember him so clearly. It was clear that she had a deep impression of Yun Maxiao. Of course, Lin Qingxue replied nonchalantly. As long as they're good-looking, I can remember them all. Lin Qingchen also remembered Yun Maxiao, a tall, burly boy. Grandfather, cousin looks so much like Sister Ruoyan. If Sister Ruoyan were to wear male clothing, she'd look like a miniature version of cousin. Like Ruoyan? Lin Zainan frowned. It's not good for boys to be too pretty. After announcing the good news, Yun Ruoyan was about to begin her pillmaster lesson. Because Lin Qingchen and Lin Qingxue had already completed the homework that Lin Zainan had assigned to them, they were allowed to observe from the sidelines. Yun Ruoyan stood in the middle of the room, her hands outstretched, her fingers slightly curled upward, and 2 balls of scarlet flame appeared in her palms. This was the first time that Lin Qingchen and Lin Qingxue had seen Yun Ruoyan condense a spiritual flame, and they couldn't help but widen their eyes. Lin Qingxue had already determined that she didn't have any talent as a pillmaster, and she didn't have much of an affinity for magical beasts. She most likely didn't have any talent as a summoner either. As a result, Lin Zainan's training for her had always been focused on becoming both a blade master and a forge master. Lin Qingchen, on the other hand, had some talent as a pill master. Although her talent wasn't particularly high, she was diligent, and she was very knowledgeable about spiritual herbs and magical beasts. Lin Zainan had high hopes for her. Lin Zainan was also waiting for her to become a 7th-rank blade master before he would immediately begin training her as a pill master. Lin Qingxue was just watching the show, but Lin Qingchen was very serious. The 2 balls of spiritual flame in Yun Ruoyan's hands began to change. One moment they were the size of a fist, and the next they were 2 tiny flames. Not bad, Lin Zainan commented. Now that you can freely control the size of your spiritual flame, let's see how well you can control the transformation of the flames. As soon as Lin Zainan finished speaking, the flames in Yun Ruoyan's hands turned from scarlet to orange and then to yellow. This time, not only did Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen's eyes widen, but even Lin Zainan and Yun Ruoyan's eyes widened. The spiritual fire was finally extinguished in Yun Ruoyan's palm. She probed her spiritual vortex and found that it was a vast expanse of white, devoid of any fire-attuned spiritual energy. Ruoyan, how did you do it? Lin Zainan walked over, his tone somewhat surprised. Yun Ruoyan retracted her spiritual energy from her spiritual vortex and looked at Lin Zainan, her expression somewhat dazed. Grandfather, Yun Ruoyan began. I don't know how I did it either. In the morning, I didn't have any fire-attuned spiritual energy in my spiritual vortex. But just now, when you were teaching me, I casually examined my spiritual vortex and discovered that some fire-attuned spiritual energy had appeared out of nowhere. Lin Zainan stroked his beard and frowned. As he listened to Xuanhuan's story, his expression turned serious. And these past few days I've been absorbing and condensing spiritual energy from the heavens and the earth, so I haven't had the time to practice using my spiritual flame. I don't know why my spiritual flame suddenly leveled up and turned yellow. Cautious people were always suspicious of the logical benefits that fell from the sky. That was because something that looked good on the surface might have hidden dangers behind it. Why had fire-attuned spiritual energy suddenly appeared in her spiritual vortex without any refinement? Why had her cultivation suddenly increased without any refinement? This was a very strange situation. Isn't an increase in cultivation a good thing? Lin Xianxia asked Lin Qingqian, puzzled. Why are Sister Ruoyan and grandfather so serious? Lin Qingqian's expression was also serious. I heard grandfather say that it's rare for one's cultivation to increase by itself, and it could be caused by the confinement of one's spiritual vortex. The confinement of one's spiritual vortex meant that for some unknown reason, one's spiritual vortex would lose its ability to expand. Under such circumstances, one's cultivation would temporarily increase by itself. But this was a bad omen. The chances of this happening were extremely low. Could it be happening to Xuanhuan? All of them couldn't help but feel nervous. Qiuqiu. Suddenly Qiuqiu's voice rang out in Xuanhuan's mind. Mistress, don't worry. There's nothing wrong with your spiritual vortex. Nothing wrong? Hearing Qiuqiu's words, Xuanhuan let out a sigh of relief. Do you know why this happened to me? Qiuqiu asked. Qiuqiu really wanted to tell Xuanhuan about the qilin beads, but it didn't dare reveal anything about Liamo, otherwise if Liamo pursued the matter, it wouldn't be fun. As a result, Xuanhuan could only find out for herself. I don't know, Qiuqiu, Qiuqiu replied. If it's not a problem with your spiritual vortex, then it could be an external cause. Mistress, think about it carefully. Have you come into contact with any spiritual objects that can increase your cultivation? Even if I can't say it directly, I can at least lead Mistress to a guess. If she guesses it herself, then it's none of my business. You're with me every day. How could you not know what spiritual objects I've come into contact with? Xuanhuan asked. But as soon as she spoke, she suddenly thought of something. Could it be this? Xuanhuan hurriedly rolled up her sleeves, revealing the bracelet and the qilin beads for Lin Zainan to see. Grandfather, can you see if there's anything strange about these beads? Chapter 98. Lin Zainan noticed that the bead was grayish-brown in color, and it didn't have any special odor. It looked no different from a string of toys that could be bought for 2 copper coins on the streets. Where did you get this? Lin Zainan didn't notice anything special about the bead at first glance. I got it from the slaughtering king, Xuanhuan replied. Although she wouldn't tell Lin Zainan of her own accord if he asked, she didn't want to lie to him unless it was absolutely necessary. The slaughtering king. Lin Zainan looked at Xuanhuan in shock. The legendary killing god, the slaughtering king? Lin Xianxia was clearly excited. When she was young, Lin Bo had loved to tell her stories about the slaughtering king. Not only did the carnage and bloodshed not frighten Lin Xianxia, but it even aroused her fearless passion. There's no other slaughtering king on the entire Xuanhuan continent. In stark contrast to Lin Xianxia's excitement, Lin Qingqian's tone and expression revealed her dislike for the slaughtering king, even a little bit of disgust. Lin Qingqian had been studying medicine by Lin Zainan's side ever since she was a child, and she often tended to the wounds of those who were injured. She could be considered an experienced physician who was used to seeing blood. But it was precisely because of this that Lin Qingqian hated anything and everything related to blood and death. A few days ago, when I went to the Lu Manor to play with Miss Lu, I heard that the slaughtering king was also at the flower viewing party, Lin Xianxia replied. I even heard about the relationship between the slaughtering king and Sister Ruoyan. I've always wanted to ask Sister Ruoyan about it, but, Lin Xianxia glanced at Lin Qingqian. She could tell that Lin Qingqian wasn't happy, but she didn't mind. Lin Xianxia was still too young to attend the flower viewing party, but Lin Qingqian had received an invitation. However, she had never been interested in such events. She would rather spend her time researching spiritual herbs and beasts in her bamboo garden than accompanying a large group of people and putting on an act. As a result, she pretended to be ill and didn't go. Lin Xianxia stared at Xuanhuan, her eyes burning with curiosity. As soon as she heard the news, she had hurriedly told Lin Qingqian about it. If Lin Qingchen hadn't stopped her, she would have taken every opportunity to ask Xuanhuan about it. After all, this was something to be proud of. However, Lin Qingchen said that the slaughtering king's actions had always been unpredictable. One day he wanted to marry someone and the next he wanted to kill someone. Therefore, there was no need to publicize this matter. It would be best not to tell even his maternal grandfather, lest he would worry. As a result, it was only now that Lin Zainan, who rarely ventured out, found out about what had happened between the slaughtering king and Xuanhuan at the flower viewing party. His thoughts were the same as Lin Qingchen's. The slaughtering king's actions were often unpredictable, but what worried Lin Zainan the most was not the slaughtering king, but the Rong family. Although Rong Yuehong had been crippled by the slaughtering king, Xuanhuan had a hand in it. The head of the Rong family, Rong Tianling, was a vengeful man. Since he couldn't afford to offend Li Mo, Xuanhuan would be the next target. Grandfather, don't worry. No matter what, I'm still the sole wife-born daughter of the Yun family. Unless he has a valid reason, Rong Tianling wouldn't dare do anything to me. Xuanhuan replied fearlessly. Lin Zainan didn't ask Xuanhuan how she had obtained the bead from the slaughtering king. He only told her that although the bead didn't look like anything special, since it belonged to the slaughtering king, it definitely wasn't simple. It might even be a spiritual tool that could aid in cultivation. Xuanhuan looked at the bead on her wrist and suddenly remembered that it had been a long time since that annoying fellow had bothered her. At that moment, Li Mo was on his way back from the Yu Kingdom. 10 days ago, he had received news from the Yu Kingdom that the remnants of the shamanic tribe had been discovered. As soon as Li Mo received the news, he had rushed over and finally learned from an old shamanic about the origins of Xuanhuan's poison. What's more, there was something else that even Li Mo hadn't expected. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. During these 2 days, Xuanhuan would spend a lot of time in her residence. She knew that if Yun Maxia were to return, he would definitely pay his respects to her grandmother first. But in the end, Xuanhuan didn't get to see him before the Yun matriarch's birthday banquet. Early in the morning, when the moon was still high in the sky, the Yun household was already bustling with activity. By the time the sky brightened, everything was ready, and all that was left was the arrival of the guests. Compared to its usual tranquility, Xuanhuan's residence was a little crowded today. Xuanhuan had arrived a little earlier than when she had come to pay her respects a few days ago, but today someone had arrived before her. Mother, you look really energetic today. Madame An personally helped the Yun matriarch dress and comb her hair. She stood behind the Yun matriarch and inserted a jade phoenix hairpin into her snow-white hair in front of the mirror. The Yun matriarch didn't like to wear red, but she couldn't be too plain on her birthday. She was dressed in a sapphire blue satin dress, embroidered with 999 longevity characters. Her sleeves and skirt were similarly embroidered with auspicious clouds. Indeed, she looked quite spirited. Madame N, on the other hand, was dressed in a bright red pleated dress embroidered with peonies. Paired with a complicated headdress, she looked even more regal than the Yun matriarch. The Yun matriarch looked at her children and grandchildren who were surrounding her. Yun Ruoyao, Yun Ruoyu, Yi Qianying, and a few of her concubine-born granddaughters were all dressed in gorgeous formal dresses and expensive headdresses. Gathered together, they were a sight to behold. Yun Ruoyan stood quietly in a corner. Although she was also dressed in a festive red dress, she appeared much plainer compared to the rest of the girls. If one didn't pay attention, they would surely overlook her. However, if they were to look at her alone, they would surely be stunned. Yun Ruoyan wore a veil that was almost the same color as her skin, and her face was as beautiful and pure as a dewy flower bud. The red semi-vertical collar dress accentuated the curves of her body, giving her a hint of maturity. Pure elegance and a hint of maturity appeared on the same person, but they didn't seem to clash at all. The Yun matriarch nodded in satisfaction before turning her gaze away from Yun Ruoyan and back to Madame N. It's a good idea to dress up on such a grand occasion. Grandmother, may you live a long life. A youth dressed in purple walked in and bowed to the Yun matriarch. Muyuan. The Yun matriarch gestured for him to stand up. When did you return with your father? Yun Muyuan straightened up and replied, I rushed back late last night. Father was outside talking to my uncle, and I couldn't wait any longer, so I came to pay my respects to you, grandmother. The Yun matriarch only had one legitimate son and one legitimate daughter, but she had 3 illegitimate sons and 2 illegitimate daughters. Of the 3 illegitimate sons, Yun Moyuan's father, Yun Feng, was in charge of the family's businesses. Yun Feng was often away from home, and Yun Moyuan, who didn't have much talent for cultivation, had followed him to learn how to run a business. Yun Moyuan exchanged a few more auspicious words with the Yun matriarch before standing with Yun Ruoyao and the others. When his gaze inadvertently landed on Yun Ruoyan, he couldn't take his eyes off her. Yun Moyuan had seen quite a few beauties in his life, and the sisters in front of him, for example, were all top-notch beauties. They were the cream of the crop and they were the cream of the crop. But the girl in the corner had a distant, illusory beauty to her. Her beauty was alluring but also unapproachable like a mirage. For a moment Yun Moyuan was stunned. When Yun Ruoyan felt his gaze, she couldn't help but reveal a look of disdain. When Yun Moyuan saw the girl in front of him suddenly look at him and then roll her eyes at him, he couldn't help but blush. He didn't know that in the few months that he had been away Yun Ruoyan had changed. In his mind, Yun Ruoyan was still an ugly girl who couldn't be seen in public, and he wouldn't have the slightest connection with this beautiful lady in front of him. Sister Ruoyu. Yun Moyuan finally shifted his gaze away from Yun Ruoyan and whispered to Yun Ruoyu beside him, "Which aunt's daughter is wearing that red dress?" He was familiar with all of his uncle's daughters, but his two aunts had married far away, so he wasn't familiar with them. "Cousin, be careful. That's a fox demon that only knows how to seduce people." Yun Ruoyu had long since noticed Yun Moyuan's infatuated expression. "Sister, don't joke around, I'm serious." Yun Moyuan thought that she was being sarcastic. Yun Ruoyao tilted her head and said coolly, "That's Yun Ruoyan, the girl you fought with before. Don't you recognize her?" "What? It's her?" Yun Moyuan couldn't help but raise his voice, his face full of disbelief. Yi Qianying looked over, and a sneer that no one noticed flashed across her lips. Yun Moyuan wiped his eyes with his sleeves before looking at Yun Ruoyan once more. Finally, he could see some traces of the ugly girl he'd once despised in her. How could it be her? She was clearly an ugly freak. How could she have transformed into a fairy? Yun Moyuan's face finally turned into one of bewilderment. "It's getting late and the guests should be arriving soon," the Yun matriarch spoke up. At this moment Lucier said, "Don't stay here with me. Hurry up and find other young masters and ladies to play with." "Cousin, aren't you going out with us?" Yun Ruoyu tugged at the still-dazed Yun Moyuan. Yun Moyuan returned to his senses and looked at Yun Ruoyan with a complicated expression before leaving with the crowd. "Ruoyan, you should go play too. It's so boring to stay with an old lady like me." "I don't feel bored, grandmother," Yun Ruoyan said half coquettishly. Okay. Then you stay here." The Yun matriarch looked at Yun Ruoyan dotingly. She had long since forgotten about Yun Ruoyan's birthmark, and she felt that it would be nice to have such a lovely granddaughter by her side. Madam and looked at Yun Ruoyan, her eyes cold. "Yun Ruoyan, don't blame me for being heartless. You're the one who forced me to do this." Chapter 99. After the crowd left, peace returned to the Yun manor, but the front gates were bustling with activity. All sorts of carriages and horses filled the wide road, leaving only a small path in the middle for people to walk on. Yun Lan was personally welcoming the guests at the front gates when a servant in charge of arranging the carriages hurriedly ran in from the side door. Steward Wu was arranging for the guests to send their gifts into the warehouse. When he saw the servant's head down and not looking at the road, he yelled at him, "Stop! What are you so flustered for? I won't forgive you if you offend a guest." The servant raised his head, his face full of grievance. When he saw Steward Wu, he immediately walked over. "Steward Wu, quickly report to the master that Rong Qianling's carriage is here," but he refused to stop at the entrance and insisted on driving all the way to our front gates. "I said no and he hit me." The servant showed the side of his face he had been covering to Steward Wu. The red handprint on his face was swollen. Although he had been ruthless, he hadn't used any spiritual energy, or he would have killed the servant with a single slap. Regardless of Rong Qianling's status, his domineering personality alone was enough to make everyone in the capital fearful of him. Steward Wu didn't dare delay any longer and immediately reported the matter to Yun Lan. The smile that Yun Lan had maintained for a long time disappeared in an instant. Yun Lan had long since learned of what had happened at the flower viewing party from Yun Ruoyao and the others, and he had even specifically sought out Yun Ruoyan. Yun Lan could also sense that Yun Ruoyan's temper was becoming more and more aggressive, and he wanted to use this opportunity to teach her a lesson so that she wouldn't cause more trouble for the Yun family in the future. What Yun Lan hadn't expected was that Yun Ruoyan's few words had rendered him speechless, and he had no choice but to let the matter rest. Yun Lan could still clearly remember how Yun Ruoyan had rebutted him that day. He had ordered Yun Ruoyan to kneel in the ancestral hall as punishment, and Yun Ruoyan had asked herself what she had done wrong. Yun Lan had said that she was arrogant and overzealous, and that she had made enemies for the Yun family. In that case, Rowan, may I ask, Father, if that Miss Rong challenged me to a duel, should I, the sole wife-born daughter of the Yun family, cower in front of all the scions of the capital? Yun Ruoyan stared directly into Yun Lan's dark eyes. She didn't even feel the slightest bit of respect, let alone retreat. Rong Yuehong's attacks were vicious. She tried to use her spiritual energy to crush me, but I didn't want to be crushed, so I fought back and defeated her. In the end, not only did she refuse to stop, she even used her spiritual needles to kill me on the spot. If not for the slaughtering king's help, I'm afraid I wouldn't have the chance to listen to my father's reprimand. Yun Ruoyan's small body was ramrod straight, her hands were clenched into fists on both sides of her body. Her big eyes were filled with tears as she stared straight at Yun Lan, but she stubbornly refused to shed a single tear. Father, are you going to abandon your daughter like you did 3 years ago? As she spoke, the corners of Yun Ruoyan's mouth curled up, carrying a hint of mockery. By the time Yun Lan tried to take a closer look, all that was left of Yun Ruoyan's face was a miserable one. In the end, she still found out about this matter. That Miss Rong must have told her, Yun Lan thought. 3 years ago, Yun Lan was facing yet another promotion, and Rong Tianling was an important part of it. If he had offended Rong Tianling, Yun Lan's promotion would have been obstructed. At the time, Yun Ruoyan's cultivation had regressed significantly, and the birthmark on her face had worsened for no apparent reason. After discussing it with the Yun matriarch, Yun Lan decided to temporarily abandon Yun Ruoyan in order to suppress Rong Tianling's anger. Once he was promoted, he would decide whether or not to accept Yun Ruoyan back into the family academy. However, over the past 3 years, Yun Ruoyan had disappointed Yun Lan more and more, to the point that Yun Lan had even considered stripping her of her status as the eldest daughter of the family. But not long ago, this daughter of Yun Lan's, who had almost lost all sense of existence, seemed to have transformed into a completely different person. Whether it was her cultivation or her demeanor, it was as if she had been born anew. While Yun Lan was pleasantly surprised, he also had his suspicions. As a result, he had sent people to investigate Yun Ruoyan. The results were that Yun Ruoyan had been visiting the Lin Manor frequently, and everything else was normal. From this, Yun Lan was certain that Lin Zainan must have fed Yun Ruoyan a miraculous pill that could transform her entire body, causing her to change so drastically. This was something that Yun Lan was happy to see, so he allowed Yun Ruoyan to visit the Lin Manor. Master, what do you think we should do? Uncle Rong's carriage is blocking the eastern road, and guests from the east won't be able to enter. Old Wu lowered his head and waited for Yun Lan to make a decision. Although Yun Lan had long since been promoted, the Rong family was still influential in the Li Kingdom, and now wasn't the time to fall out with them. Yun Lan thought for a moment, then turned to Yun Feng. Fourth brother, you stay here and take care of the guests. I'll go take a look. Yun Lan was led by the servant boy who had been beaten to the east side of the road. From afar, he saw a large carriage pulled by 5 large horses blocking the road. There were quite a few other carriages behind the carriage, but no one dared to voice their anger. Some of the more anxious ones had driven their carriages to the western road, but it was only noon, and there were still many guests who wanted to use this road. If they went to the western road would be blocked as well. Uncle Rong, please forgive me for not coming out to greet you. Yun Lan called out to the carriage from afar. This time he used his spirit force, and his voice traveled far away with the fluctuation of spirit force. The curtains of the carriage were lifted, and Rong Tianling poked his head out. He had thick eyebrows, a tiger's eyes, and a bull's nose. His beard was neatly trimmed, and his robes were purple, gold, and blue. Official Yun, your family's road isn't good enough, Rong Tianling mocked. I've made a fool of myself in front of you. Yun Lan was unfazed by Rong Tianling's mockery. He walked up to the carriage and smiled. Uncle Rong, please alight from the carriage and come to my manor. I'll be sure to offer you tea as an apology. Yun Lan had always been a strict man at home, but he was known as a smiling tiger in the bureaucracy. The smile on his face was warm and friendly, but it didn't reach his eyes at all. What a smiling tiger. Not long ago he had sent someone to Yun Lan's manor to demand an explanation for Rong Yuehong's matter, but Yun Lan had refused to see him on the grounds that he was busy with official business. Rong Tianling had gone to the palace to complain, but his sister, the empress, had reprimanded him for not teaching his daughter properly. Even the emperor's brother-in-law, who had always been respectful to him, had ignored him. Rong Tianling's anger had been simmering. Rong Tianling had long since prepared to make a scene in front of everyone. Rong Tianling snorted coldly. It's easy for me to get off the carriage, but there's someone inside. What do you think we should do? Rong Tianling lifted the curtains, revealing a haggard woman within. Yunlan raised his eyes and couldn't help but frown. The woman sat limply on the cushions of the carriage. Her eyes were sunken and her face was waxy yellow. Her bony body was wrapped in an extravagant dress. His sparse, withered hair was barely fastened with jewels. He gave off the feeling of a skeleton wrapped in silk and satin. It was incomparably strange. Rong Tianling, what is the meaning of this? Yunlan finally stopped smiling. Today was the Yun matriarch's birthday, but Rong Tianling had sent a sickly woman to block his doorstep. This was clearly looking for trouble, and no matter how good-tempered he was, he had a reason to explode. What is the meaning of this? Rong Tianling raised his voice, pointing at the sickly woman. Official Yun, do you not recognize her? She's your good niece, my obedient daughter Rong Yuehong. Yunlan's brows furrowed even further. He took a closer look at the woman and finally recognized her. Indeed, it was the eldest daughter of the Rong family, just as domineering as her father. But how had she become like this? Haha. Rong Tianling chuckled strangely. It's all thanks to your daughter that my good daughter has become what she is today. How can I not thank the two of you properly? As it turned out, Rong Yuehong hadn't changed even after her cultivation had been crippled by Liemo. However, the times had changed, and the scions of the Rong family who had once been subservient to her no longer respected her. That day, Rong Yuehong had vented her anger on a female clansman who had always obeyed her orders by slapping her across the face. As a result, that girl who had never retaliated, had actually slapped Rong Yuehong across the face. Rong Yuehong couldn't take this lying down, and she charged forward to teach the girl a lesson. In her fury, she had forgotten that she was a cripple, and that her opponent was a fourth-rank blade master. The result was as expected. Rong Yuehong was beaten like a dead dog, unable to retaliate at all. What caused Rong Yuehong's insides to burn the most was that those who had once been her admirers had surrounded her and jeered at her while she was being beaten. Their laughter was like poisonous needles stabbing into Rong Yuehong's brain, making her want to die. In the end, Rong Yuehong had to be carried back by a few servants. She had one of them look for Rong Tianling, thinking that her father, who had treated her like a treasure since she was a child, would stand up for her. However, all she got was a cold rebuke from Rong Tianling. At that time, Rong Tianling had just run into a wall in the imperial palace. When he returned, he found Rong Yuehong beaten into a pig's head and crying to him. He was angry and furious, but most of all he felt that he had lost all face. After scolding Rong Yuehong, Rong Tianling told her not to attend the family academy anymore and to stay at home until she was married. Then with a flick of his sleeves he left. Rong Yuehong sat on the ground in a daze for a long time before she finally realized that she had been expelled from the family academy. In the near future she would become the most unremarkable concubine in a large family. What awaited her was endless mockery and humiliation. As a result, that very night, the first miss of the Rong family drank poison and committed suicide. Fortunately, her servants had discovered her in time and saved her life. However, Rong Yuehong's bodily functions had been destroyed by the poison, and she had become what she was today. Kiki. Kiki. At this moment, Rong Yuehong suddenly opened her eyes. Her mouth was wide open, and a strange sound came from her throat. My dear daughter, what are you trying to say? Rong Tianling immediately leaned over to listen. After a short while, he raised his head and said, If you want us to get off the carriage, that's fine, but my daughter wants your daughter to carry her. Chapter 100. Yun Ruoyan was playing 5-lane chess with the Yun matriarch to kill time. This was a game that Yun Ruoyan had invented herself. It was simpler than Go and it didn't require much thought, but it was also very fun. The Yun matriarch had become addicted to the game. Grandmother, I don't want to play here. As soon as Yun Ruoyan put down a piece, she immediately wanted to change her mind. No regrets. The Yun matriarch slapped Yun Ruoyan's outstretched hand. Grandmother, just this once, just this once. Yun Ruoyan tried her most effective method of coquettishness. As expected, the Yun matriarch's heart softened. Just this once. Don't go back on your word. Alright, just this once. Yun Ruoyan smiled at Xiaolan, who was standing by the Yun matriarch's side. Just then, a manservant rushed in, saying that the old master had summoned Yun Ruoyan to the front hall for some business. Yun Ruoyan glanced at the manservant and saw that his expression wasn't quite right. She knew that her father was probably up to no good. Without raising her head, Yun Ruoyan replied casually, Is it something urgent? I'm playing chess with grandmother right now. Can I go after this game? The manservant rubbed his hands together anxiously. No, miss, the old master wants you to go immediately. Before Xuanhuan could respond, the Yun matriarch slammed the piece in her hand onto the chessboard. With a thud, the Yun matriarch placed the chess piece in her hand on the chessboard and said, "What's so important that it's more important than the birthday girl playing chess?" "Oh, my dear ancestor." The manservant was so frightened that he fell to his knees and recounted everything that had happened. He even showed the swollen half of his face to the Yun matriarch and Xuanhuan. "That Rong Tianling has been a brat since he was young, and he's still causing trouble at his age," the Yun matriarch commented. She had heard about what had happened at the flower viewing party, not from anyone else, but from Xuanhuan herself. "This old brat is trying to embarrass himself at my grandmother's birthday banquet." The Yun matriarch stood up, and Xuanhuan hurriedly stood up to support her. "Grandmother, slow down." The Yun matriarch patted Xuanhuan's hand and said kindly, "Ruoyan, don't be afraid. Whoever dares to bully you today will be embarrassing me. Come, let's go to the front together." Xuanhuan had known from the start that today's birthday banquet wouldn't be peaceful. Sure enough, a disturbance had arisen even before the banquet had begun. Since she had no choice but to attend the banquet, the safest option was to stay by her grandmother's side. As a result, even if she didn't have to cultivate, she would come to play cards and chess with her grandmother. His purpose was to let Mrs. Liu gradually get used to his company, and in the end, she can't leave him. At the start, Xuanhuan had only intended to make use of the Yun matriarch, but as time passed, she found that being with her grandmother, making her happy, and acting coquettishly in front of her gave her an inexplicable sense of satisfaction. Therefore, the fake feelings slowly became sincere. The Yun matriarch boarded the palanquin, and Xuanhuan stood by her side as they followed the servant toward the eastern entrance of the Yun manor. "What's going on? Whose carriage is blocking the road?" A guest who had just arrived asked curiously. "It's the Rong family's carriage and it's been blocking the road for quite a while," someone explained. "The Rong family?" That person had a shocked expression on his face. He suppressed his voice and said, "How could someone as sensible as Lord Yun provoke that overlord? Don't you know? During the flower viewing banquet, the slaughtering king crippled the Rong family's daughter's cultivation for the sake of the Yun family's second daughter. Since the tyrant can't deal with the slaughtering king, nor can he take this lying down, he naturally came to the Yun manor to cause trouble. But that's too much. It's the Yun matriarch's birthday and he's causing trouble. When has this tyrant not been too much? The crown prince and the slaughtering king aren't here yet, and the show will only get more exciting when everyone's here. Let's just watch." More and more people gathered to watch the show. The slaughtering king Li Mo hadn't arrived yet, but the crown prince was on his way. Li Qianxiao didn't want to come at all. Because of what had happened during the flower viewing banquet, he had been grounded by Li Xiu for half a month, and he was incredibly depressed. Moreover, there were two women in the Yun family that he didn't want to see, Xuanhuan and Yi Qianying. However, the empress insisted that he go. If it were any other time he wouldn't mind pretending to be ill, but this was a sensitive period. If he were to throw a tantrum, wouldn't the engagement be for nothing? Fortunately, the second prince had finally returned to the palace, and was more than willing to accompany him. As a result, the two brothers rode back to the Yun manor under the protection of a group of imperial guards. "Brother, is that daughter of the Yun family really as frightening as you say?" Li Qianyuan turned to Li Qianxiao and asked. "Of course," Li Qianxiao replied without hesitation. Li Qianxiao replied without hesitation, "It wouldn't be a big deal if she were just plain ugly, but once that veil was taken off, she really did look like a fairy turned into a ghost. If it weren't for your brother's boldness, I would have been so scared that I would have fallen ill." "Oh, is she really that frightening?" Li Qianxiao's words only whetted Li Qianyuan's appetite. "I'm not lying to you. You'll know once you see her. I'd like to see if she's even scarier than the water demons in the eastern sea of the Chen kingdom." Li Qianyuan raised his slender eyebrows. Compared to his brothers, he was more feminine, having inherited Li Xiu's long, narrow eyes. However, his facial features were quite handsome and his skin was smooth and supple. When he smiled, he looked even more charming than a woman. Rong Tianling grew a little anxious when Xuanhuan still hadn't arrived. "Official Yun, is your daughter afraid of people? I've heard that she's incredibly ugly, and at the flower viewing banquet she first tried to seduce the slaughtering king, then threw herself into his arms. The slaughtering king, who then refused to play hard to get, has already become a legend." Yun Lan glanced at Rong Yuehong, who was sitting in the carriage. "If your daughter dares to show her face, why wouldn't my daughter?" However, he couldn't be bothered to argue with her in front of so many people. Seeing that Rong Tianling was about to continue, Yunlan interrupted. His Highness, the Slaughtering King, will be here today as well. You'd better be careful with your words. If you anger the Slaughtering King, things won't end well for you. When Rong Tianling heard this, he shut his mouth. Master, they're here. The servant with a swollen face ran over, shouting as he ran. By the time he reached Yunlan, he was already out of breath. What took you so long? Yunlan asked. The servant clutched his stomach and gulped. Master, Madam Yun is here as well. As soon as he finished speaking, the Yun matriarch's voice rang out. I heard that you're here to celebrate my birthday, Madam Yun, but you're blocking the way. Did the Yun family do something wrong to offend you? The Yun matriarch sat on a palanquin carried over by the servant. The Yun matriarch's voice was loud and clear, and she didn't sound like an 80-year-old woman at all. When she was young, she had been a powerful cultivator, reaching the peak of 8th rank as a blade master. Even in her old age, she still exuded the aura of a powerful cultivator. Rong Tianling finally got out of the carriage and bowed to the Yun matriarch. Old madam, it's not that I'm being unreasonable, it's just that I, the imperial uncle, can't find a place to reason with. Umph. The Yun matriarch snorted coldly. Go look for whoever made you suffer. I heard that the one who crippled your daughter at the flower viewing party was the Slaughtering King, and he just so happens to have sent out an invitation today. You can go look for him when he arrives. Everyone knew that the one who had truly injured Rong Yuehong was the Slaughtering King, but the Yun matriarch was the only one who would dare point a finger at the Slaughtering King. That's right, Madam Yun's right. Someone who had been stuck in the road for a long time chimed in. Uncle, you're looking for the wrong person. Since the main character isn't here yet, you should stop blocking the road. It wouldn't be good if we missed the auspicious timing of the banquet. Uncle, please make way. A chorus of voices rang out from behind Rong Tianling's carriage. I don't care about any of that. Annoyed by the crowd's voices, Rong Tianling suddenly decided to be unreasonable. With a wave of his hand, a powerful surge of spiritual energy overflowed from his palm. The spiritual energy turned into a gust of wind that blew away the curtains of the carriage behind him, revealing Rong Yuehong, who was lying on the soft couch like a skeleton. When the crowd saw the person in the carriage, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. The capital was rich, and even the beggars in the city had oily faces. No one had ever seen someone so thin and lifeless like a ghost. That's my daughter. Rong Tianling suddenly burst into tears. My beautiful daughter, just because she fought with your Yun Ruoyan at the flower viewing party, she's become like this. Everyone take a look. How am I supposed to reason with her? Oh my, how did Miss Rong end up like this? That's right. She's a famous beauty in the capital. A few months ago, I even accompanied Miss Rong to the Minghuang Mountain to admire the flowers. Miss Rong was still very pretty at the time, so how did she end up like this after a single flower viewing party? The crowd sighed as they looked at Rong Yuehong's state. Kiki. Rong Yuehong began to make strange noises from within the carriage. Rong Tianling immediately jumped onto the carriage and nodded as he listened to Rong Yuehong. Then he turned to Yun Ruoyan, who had been standing quietly by the Yun matriarch's side. Although Yuehong was injured by the Slaughtering King, Yun Ruoyan was still the cause. As a result, all of her resentment is directed at Yun Ruoyan. Now that Yuehong is in this half-dead state, she wants Yun Ruoyan to carry her for a while so that she can vent her anger. Can't the Yun family satisfy her even with such a small request? She's quite pitiful. She's such a fine young miss. Actually, it's not a big deal to carry her. She doesn't look that heavy. That's right, she doesn't look like she's going to live much longer. Let's just grant her last wish. The crowd had always been compassionate, and they quickly leaned towards Rong Yuehong's side. Yun Lan had long since had enough of Rong Tianling's pestering, so he ordered Yun Ruoyan carry her for a while. The Yun matriarch hesitated. She wouldn't allow Yun Ruoyan to be hurt, but the Rong family only wanted her to carry Rong Yuehong for a while. Ruoyan, why don't you carry her for a while? Yun Ruoyan glanced at Yun Lan and the Yun matriarch, a mocking smile on her face. All right, I'll carry her. Chapter 101. Almost everyone thought that carrying Rong Yuehong on Yun Ruoyan's back was a small matter. After all, Rong Yuehong seemed to be the more pitiful one. It was only right to fulfill a pitiful request from a pitiful person. Yun Lan and the Yun matriarch were thinking about how to deal with this troublesome pair of father and daughter as quickly as possible, so that Yun Ruoyan wouldn't be harmed in front of so many people. As long as she carried Rong Yuehong, who didn't weigh much, a few steps, the Rong family's carriage would be able to reach a safe location, and the people who were stuck at the back would be able to make their way over. Then the birthday party would proceed smoothly. Even though she had lived 2 lives, Yun Ruoyan still felt that it was a humiliating and despicable thing to do. Yun Ruoyan walked steadily toward the carriage. She thought of Lin Zainin. Her grandfather would never allow her to suffer such humiliation. She couldn't help but think of Li Mo. Thankfully, he hadn't arrived yet. She really didn't want him to see her in such a sorry state. The scions of the Yun family stood in front of the main entrance, some whispering to each other, some silent, and some simply watching the show, laughing from time to time. Yun Ruoyao, Yun Ruoyu, and Yi Qinying didn't bother to hide their schadenfreude as they watched Yun Ruoyan walk toward the Rong family's carriage. Li Qianxiao and Li Qianyuan had already reached the entrance, and from afar, they could see a large crowd blocking the road. Li Qianxiao wanted to send someone to clear the road, but Li Qianyuan was interested. There's bound to be a good show if there's a crowd. Brother, why don't we go watch as well? The two of them had their guards wait where they were as they walked toward the crowd. As they walked, Li Qianxiao said, "What's so interesting about a street show like this? I heard that the Yihong brothel just bought a batch of female slaves from the Imo kingdom. Tonight, I'll take you to enjoy the scenery." There were 4 kingdoms on the Qinyuan continent: the Li kingdom, the Yu kingdom, the Qin kingdom, and the Imo kingdom. The Li and Yu kingdoms were the strongest. The Li kingdom relied heavily on military might, and the Yu kingdom was the wealthiest of the 4. The Qin kingdom was next to the East Sea, and its waters were rich with treasures. The Imo nation was the poorest and weakest country, but it was rich in beauties. On the Qinyuan continent, any slightly better fireworks venue would have beautiful and enchanting female slaves. When Li Qianyuan heard Li Qianhan's words, he smiled and leaned over. Using the hibiscus fan in his hand as a shield, he whispered a few words into Li Qianxiao's ear. "Really?" Li Qianxiao turned to look at Li Qianyuan, his face filled with delight. "When have I ever lied to you?" Li Qianyuan pointed his fan at the sky. "I guarantee that you will be satisfied." The two of them squeezed into the crowd as they spoke. Because they were dressed casually and everyone's attention was on Yun Ruoyan, no one noticed the arrival of the crown prince and the second prince. "Look, that's Yun Ruoyan." Both of them were quite tall, and Li Qianxiao was able to spot Yun Ruoyan immediately. "What's she doing over there?" Li Qianyuan looked in the direction Li Qianxiao was pointing, only to see a woman carrying another elegantly dressed woman on her back in front of the carriage. Why aren't all the servants helping out? Are they letting a young miss carry someone? A youth by the side was shocked to see the crown prince and the second prince. Just as he was about to bow, Li Qianyuan tapped his own mouth with his fan, gesturing for him to keep quiet. The young man was frightened for a moment, and then his face turned slightly red. Yun Ruoyan carried Rong Yuehong on her back and began walking toward the Yun Manor's gates. Yun Ruoyan kept a smile on her face the entire time, burying all her emotions deep in her heart. Everyone could only see a calm, unfazed Yun Ruoyan. The Yun matriarch nodded in satisfaction. Even Yun Lan felt that his daughter, despite her stubbornness, was quite sensible at critical moments. Cough, cough. Rong Yuehong began coughing violently on Yun Ruoyan's back, and a strange rancid odor sprayed out of her mouth onto Yun Ruoyan's face. "Haha." Rong Yuehong let out a low, strange cackle. "Yun Ruoyan, it's all your fault that I'm like this today. Do you know what those people in the family who tried to curry favor with me said about me? They said that I'm useless, that I'm worse than dog shit, that a featherless phoenix can't even compare to a chicken. All of this is because of you. Yun Ruoyan, you'll get what you deserve." "Ha." Yun Ruoyan, who had been silent all this time, suddenly laughed. "Miss Yun, I've heard all of these things before and they're nothing new to me. I have even worse things to say that suit you, Miss Yun." Yun Ruoyan deliberately slowed down her footsteps and spoke in a voice that only the two of them could hear. "Someone with a cheap life isn't worthy of good fortune. Even if you were given a good life token, you'd still be able to smash it to pieces. You can't blame anyone but yourself for being blind, slow-witted, and stupid. So, Miss Rong, rather than living in hatred for others, why don't you reflect on yourself? Have all these years of being a mistress gone to waste?" What are you saying? I'm not in the wrong at all." Rong Yuehong, who was still lying on Yun Ruoyan's back, trembled at Yun Ruoyan's words. Even if she didn't admit it, Yun Ruoyan's words still pierced her heart. During this period of time she had resented the heavens and the earth, resented those who tried to climb up to her, and in the end all of that resentment had turned into hatred for Yun Ruoyan. In Rong Yuehong's eyes, her current predicament was all Yun Ruoyan's fault. If not for Yun Ruoyan, she would still be the glorious first miss of the Rong family, a genius cultivator who everyone admired. It was Yun Ruoyan's appearance that had ruined everything, and naturally she wasn't at fault at all. Has no one ever told you these words before? Yun Ruoyan continued. You've been held in high regard since you were a child, so surely no one has ever told you what it means to reflect on yourself and what it means to reap what you sow? Today I'll be merciful and teach you a lesson. Your current predicament is the result of your arrogance and self-righteousness. Yun Ruoyan continued, during the flower viewing party, did you listen to Yun Ruoyao's provocation? How did you know? Rong Yuehong asked. Yun Ruoyan had noticed that Yun Ruoyao and Rong Yuehong were glancing at her from time to time as they conversed. Rong Yuehong's sudden challenge to her was definitely due to Yun Ruoyao's provocation. That good sister of mine loves to use others as cannon fodder. Naturally, she wouldn't let go of someone as sharp and brainless as Miss Rong. Being used so easily is your first folly. Since you've already lost your cultivation, and yet you still don't know how to restrain yourself, you're asking to be humiliated. That's your second mistake. Yun Ruoyan could imagine the scene of the crippled Rong Yuehong putting on airs in front of her brethren, only to be beaten to a pulp by Rong Yuehong. Even without your cultivation, you still have the status of a wife-born daughter, and you have a father who truly loves you. You could have begged him to arrange a good marriage for you, and even if you didn't want to, your father wouldn't have forced you. But you chose to use the cruelest method possible: poison yourself. That's your third mistake. Yun Ruoyan smelled the same poison that Rong Yuehong and Yi Qianying had forced into her mouth in her past life. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but feel that fate was full of coincidences and miracles. Since you'd already decided to poison yourself, why didn't you find a place where no one would find you? That way you'd die a quick death. Unfortunately, he was discovered and saved by someone. As a result, he became like this, neither human nor ghost. That's your fourth mistake. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not stupid. It's all your fault. Rong Yuehong's face had turned the color of a pig's liver, and her breath, which had been weak in the first place, seemed to be on the verge of fading away. Why don't you rest for a while? Yun Ruoyan interrupted Rong Yuehong mockingly. Most people wouldn't be able to survive in this world if they had 3 mistakes, but you, Miss Rong, are still struggling at death's door. Aren't you tired? I'd advise you to stop holding on and end your life as soon as possible. Perhaps you'll be reborn like me. Rong Yuehong's fate was very similar to Yun Ruoyan's in her past life. Both were wife-born daughters who had been crippled and poisoned. However, Yun Ruoyan had been harmed by someone else, while Rong Yuehong had brought this upon herself. But even if you were reborn, your fate wouldn't be any better. Yun Ruoyan judged mercilessly. Blind, slow-witted, and brainless. Rong Yuehong was so angry that her insides were on fire. Her head was raised high on Yun Ruoyan's body, as if she were a ferocious beast, ready to take a bite out of Yun Ruoyan's neck at any moment. I'm going to kill you. Rong Yuehong raised her head high and suddenly screamed at the sky. Her voice was so hoarse that it seemed to tear her vocal cords apart, but it was loud and clear. As she spoke, she raised her hand and tore at Yun Ruoyan's face. Her slender fingers tore off Yun Ruoyan's veil, revealing the fake birthmark on her face. Rong Yuehong clawed at Yun Ruoyan's face with all her might, as if she were using all the strength she had left in her life. Yun Ruoyan subconsciously tried to shake her off, but the skinny Rong Yuehong clung tightly to her back like an octopus. In the blink of an eye, a bloody mark appeared on Yun Ruoyan's face. No one expected the half-dead Rong Yuehong to suddenly attack Yun Ruoyan, and they all gasped in shock. Ruoyan, go protect the second miss. The Yun matriarch's gaze had been focused on Yun Ruoyan the entire time. She hadn't heard their conversation because it had been too quiet, but their every movement didn't escape her grandmother's eyes. When the Yun matriarch's servants heard her call, they immediately reacted and ran over to pull Rong Yuehong, who refused to let go of Yun Ruoyan's hand. Yun Ruoyan, cough cough cough. I won't let you off. Rong Yuehong's hair ornaments and robes were in disarray as she screamed, Yun Ruoyan, even if I become a ghost. Oh, pull you? Rong Yuehong spat out a mouthful of blood and collapsed to the ground. She had been angered to death by Yun Ruoyan. Chapter 102. I am my daughter. Rong Tianling had been holding Yun Lan by the side to express his anger. When he turned around and saw Rong Yuehong on Yun Ruoyan's back, he didn't know what was going on and he rushed over. By the time Rong Tianling arrived, Rong Yuehong had already been dragged off Yun Ruoyan's back. Then Rong Yuehong collapsed to the ground, blood spurting out of her mouth. All she could do was gasp for air. However, her eyes were still fixed on Yun Ruoyan. Rong Tianling hugged the lifeless Rong Yuehong in his arms and sobbed for a while. Then he suddenly raised his head and looked at Yun Ruoyan with a pair of ox-like eyes. Yun Ruoyan, what did you do to kill my daughter? I won't let you off. What do you mean, Elder Rong? The Yun matriarch walked over with Xiaolan's help and blocked Yun Ruoyan's path. Everyone saw it in public. It was clearly your daughter who suddenly attacked Ruoyan's back, but our Ruoyan didn't even retaliate. Rong Tianling hadn't witnessed the entire incident, and he wasn't convinced by the Yun matriarch's words. Yuehong ate a high-grade spiritual pill that can prolong her life, and the physician said that she could live for another 3 to 5 years as long as she recuperates properly. Why did she suddenly die? Yun Ruoyan must have done something to her. Elder Rong, I've given in to you over and over again, but the Yun family isn't someone you can harm as you please. Yun Lan also stood by Yun Ruoyan's side, but after he finished speaking he turned back to look at Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan could clearly see the suspicion in his eyes. Grandmother, I really didn't do anything. Yun Ruoyan hid behind the Yun matriarch's back, one hand covering her face and the other clutching the Yun matriarch's robe. The Yun matriarch patted her hand. Ruoyan, don't be afraid. Then tell Xiaolan to pick up the veil and put it back on for Yun Ruoyan. Then the Yun matriarch turned to Rong Tianling with a pair of murky yellow eyes. Everyone saw how your daughter died. Are you going to blame it on Ruoyan? The onlookers sighed at Rong Yuehong's sudden death. Did you see how Miss Rong died just now? Was it Miss Yun who did it? Someone asked. No, Miss Rong suddenly fell ill and died, someone replied. Yes, I saw it too. She suddenly went crazy on Miss Yun's back and scratched Miss Yun's face. After she was pulled off, she vomited blood and died. That Miss Rong doesn't look like she's going to live much longer. She must have deliberately brought her to the Yun family to seek misfortune. Miss Yun of the Yun family is also a dignified daughter of the first wife. She carried it without hesitation. I didn't expect Miss Rong to still be so domineering even after being reduced to such a state. From the looks of it, she must have wanted to launch a sudden attack, but in the end her body couldn't take it and she died. That's right, he died because his blood and qi attacked his heart, yet he still wants to blame Miss Yun. That's too much. Official Yun is an amiable person, or else he'd surely report this to the emperor himself. Many of the onlookers had been bullied by Rong Tianling in the past, and they were immediately enraged by this scene. Someone boldly shouted, Uncle Rong, Miss Rong has already passed away. My condolences, please hurry back to the manor and make arrangements so that Miss Rong can rest in peace. That's right. What's the point of holding such a joyous occasion? Rong Tianling's face alternated between red and green as he listened to the almost one-sided discussion of his daughter's death. He could only feel that the evil aura that was stuck in his heart was expanding. Finally, he could not hold it in any longer and his anger exploded. Rong Tianling clawed at Yun Ruoyan with both hands. In that instant, Yun Ruoyan saw a small ball of white light in his palms. That was spiritual energy leaking out of his body, and she knew that Rong Tianling's cultivation had reached the level of an early 9th rank blade master. Yun Ruoyan was a peak 7th rank blade master, but the spiritual energy that she could release from her body was only a small ball of white light. On the other hand, Rong Tianling's spiritual energy was already the size of an egg. From this, it was clear just how much of a gap there was between their cultivations. Grandmother, be careful. Yun Ruoyan knew that Rong Tianling's palm was aimed at her, and at a time like this she couldn't afford to hide behind an old woman. As a result, she stepped forward and shielded the Yun matriarch. Yun Ruoyan spread out her arms to protect the Yun matriarch. Rong Tianling's powerful palm blew away the veil that she had just put on. Yun Ruoyan closed her eyes. You dare harm a member of the Yun family? Just then Yun Lan's voice rang out, followed by the sound of spiritual energy colliding with each other. The shockwaves from the clash of spiritual energies hit Yun Ruoyan's face, causing her skin to hurt. She shut her eyes tightly as she listened to the shocked cries of the crowd. Only when the shockwaves dissipated did Yun Ruoyan open her eyes. Yun Lan was standing in front of her, his back ramrod straight. In that instant he gave Yun Ruoyan a feeling that she had never felt before. Rong Tianling, on the other hand, stood off to the side, his face pale. It was clear that he hadn't gained the upper hand against Yun Lan. The dignified imperial uncle actually carried out a sneak attack, and the targets of the sneak attack were old people and young women. What a disgrace to the royal family. That's right, what a shame. Without waiting for Yun Lan to reprimand him, the surrounding people began to mock him one after another. Li Qianxiao was currently crouching behind Li Qianyuan, afraid that Rong Tianling would accidentally see him and pull him out. That would truly be a huge embarrassment for him. Although this uncle of his had a high level of cultivation, his behavior was so unreasonable that even he, the crown prince, could not stand it. There was also his cousin, Rong Yuehong, who was a carbon copy of Rong Tianling. Instead of staying at home to recuperate, she had come out to embarrass herself. She deserved to lose her life. Second brother. Li Qianxiao called out to Li Qianyuan. There's another path to the west. Let's go there and enter the Yun Manor. Li Qianxiao narrowed his eyes as he looked at Yun Ruoyan, who was still standing in front of the Yun matriarch. When he heard Li Qianxiao call out to him, Li Qianyuan seemed to be talking to himself, but also to Li Qianxiao. As expected, she's not simple. What's not simple? Li Qianxiao didn't understand what Li Qianyuan meant. Li Qianyuan continued, that Yun Ruoyan really isn't a simple character. Not simple? She's frightening. Wait, the birthmark on her face doesn't seem as big as before. Only then did Li Qianxiao turn his attention to Yun Ruoyan's face. Yun Ruoyan had been cultivating and accompanying the Yun matriarch these past few days, and she hadn't had enough sleep at all. In order to save time and make it cooler, she used less medicinal powder when she made the fake birthmark, and the medicinal paste was thinner. The result was that the birthmark became smaller and lighter. It wasn't as scary as before. Yun Ruoyan felt that no one would be able to see it under the thin veil, and even if they did, no one would pay attention to such an eyesore. Earlier, when Rong Yuehong had removed her veil, Yun Ruoyan had cautiously covered the right side of her face. Everyone knew that she had a birthmark, so they didn't pay much attention to it. But today, a meticulous fellow had appeared in the crowd. No, it's much smaller. Li Qianxiao looked even more closely after Li Qianyuan's reminder, and his tone finally revealed a hint of surprise. He remembered that Yun Ruoyan had said that the birthmark would slowly disappear after using the medicine. At first, Li Qianxiao had thought that Yun Ruoyan was lying to him, but it turned out to be true. He couldn't help but regret his actions. By then, Rong Tianling had finally calmed his spiritual vortex. Not bad, Yun Lan. You've managed to cultivate so much spiritual energy without anyone noticing. Yun Lan was a civil official who rarely fought with others, but his cultivation wasn't low. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to establish himself in the Li Kingdom, which valued martial arts more than literature. Much to Rong Tianling's surprise, he was already a mid-stage 9th-rank blade master. Yun Lan snorted. Uncle Rong, if you want to compete, I'm more than happy to oblige. However, today is my mother's birthday, so please take your daughter and leave. Whether it's right or wrong, we'll settle it in front of His Majesty another day. Yun Lan was a shrewd man, and before his promotion he had been very subservient to Rong Tianling. As a result, Rong Tianling had never thought much of him. Who would have thought that he would be defeated by Yun Lan today? If he had lost in any other aspect, Rong Tianling might have been able to act arrogantly, but he had lost in cultivation. I have nothing to say about my lack of skill, but I won't let this matter rest. Rong Tianling finally left the Yun Manor with Rong Yuehong's corpse in his arms. My apologies, everyone. After Rong Tianling left, Yun Lan cupped his hands and apologized to the crowd. I'm sorry to have disturbed your mood. Official Yun, don't be so polite. Please get back to work and don't miss the auspicious time for the banquet. Everyone nodded in agreement, expressing their understanding. Then, according to the arrangements, they orderly entered the Yun family to offer their blessings. When the Yun matriarch returned to the Yun Manor, she didn't return to her quarters. Instead, she sat at the head of the main hall, holding Yun Ruoyan's hand the entire time. Ruoyan, let me see if you're hurt anywhere. The Yun matriarch looked Yun Ruoyan up and down. Yun Ruoyan had risked her life to shield her, and the Yun matriarch was quite touched. I'm fine, grandmother. Yun Ruoyan smiled. There's just a scratch on my face, but it's covered by my veil. Good girl. The Yun matriarch looked at Yun Ruoyan, her eyes a mixture of guilt and curiosity. Just now your father and I asked you to carry Rong Yuehong. Do you blame us for that? Not only were the Yun matriarch's eyes bright, but her heart as well. The slight change in Yun Ruoyan's expression just before she said that she would carry Rong Yuehong didn't escape her grandmother's eyes. To tell you the truth, grandmother, I didn't want to carry Rong Yuehong, but I couldn't disobey father and grandmother's orders. Yun Ruoyan didn't expect the Yun matriarch to ask such a question. After thinking for a moment, she replied, but when I was in real danger, you stood in front of me and protected me. It's clear that father and grandmother still dote on me, so I don't blame you anymore. Chapter 103. Don't you resent me? How could this be? However, Ruoyan had been reborn with a great deal of resentment, and this little bit of resentment was insignificant compared to the resentment she had suppressed in her heart. Moreover, she knew that the Yun matriarch and Yunlan wouldn't hesitate to abandon her for the sake of the family. Although she would still mock him in her heart, she would not be surprised or hurt. Perhaps because of her efforts during this period of time, her position in the hearts of the Luxia and Yunlan had improved, but compared to the family she was still insignificant. She was just a daughter that could be used and sacrificed. At most they would feel a little guilty after abandoning her. She was well aware that resentment wouldn't bring her anything useful, and Rong Yuehong was a good example of what she could do to avoid it. Only by turning resentment into motivation and cultivating enough power, to the point where no one was qualified to control you, would you be able to get rid of the shackles and obtain true freedom. Good girl. The Yun matriarch reached out to tidy up Yun Ruoyan's hair. Yun Ruoyao, Yun Ruoyu, Yi Qianying, and the other scions of the Yun matriarch were also standing not far from her. Seeing how much the Yun matriarch doted on Yun Ruoyan, all three of them had complicated expressions. On the way to the Yun manor, the three of them were almost certain that Rong Yuehong had been killed by Yun Ruoyan's sorcery. Because of Rong Yuehong's death, the conflict between the two sides had escalated. Even as Rong Tianling pointed his spear at Yun Ruoyan, the Yun matriarch and Yun Lan unhesitatingly stepped forward to protect Yun Ruoyan. In the past, Yun Ruoyan's fate would have been tragic. But now she was being pitted by the Yun matriarch. This demon is truly incredible. Grandmother and father have already been bewitched by her. If we don't get rid of this demon, the Yun family won't be able to live in peace. Why isn't mother here yet? Didn't she say that she had already arranged for people to come and kill the demon? The three of them had their own plans, but the contents of their plans were all the same. Even the way they anxiously stretched out their heads to look outside was identical. May the old madam live 10,000 years. At that moment, Crown Prince Li Qianxiao walked into the hall and bowed to the Yun matriarch. Your Highness, the Crown Prince is too polite. Yun Shi quickly got up and returned the greeting. You're the birthday boy today, so you don't have to be so polite. Please sit down. No matter what Li Qianxiao's personality was like, his years as a crown prince had taught him proper etiquette. I'm here today to offer my well wishes, so there's no need to stand on ceremony. The crowd had been about to bow, but Li Qianxiao's words dissuaded them. Li Qianxiao was dressed in a light purple robe with a jade crown on his head. His face was handsome and his lips were curled into a smile. Yet another handsome young master. He was no longer in a sorry state like he was that night in the greenhouse. Your Highness, Crown Prince. Yun Ruoyan had no choice but to bow when she saw Li Qianxiao staring at her. Ruoyan, you don't have to be so polite. Li Qianxiao stepped forward, smiling as he reached out to help Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan didn't know whether Li Qianxiao had mistakenly thought that the birthmark on her face had healed or that he was once again attracted to her beauty. Yun Ruoyan only felt that it was strange. She had clearly managed to scare him. That day at the flower viewing party, the Crown Prince hadn't even dared to look at her, and there had been almost no interaction at all. Had he taken the wrong medicine today? While Yun Ruoyan was still in a daze, Li Qianxiao's hand was already on her arm. She hurriedly took a step back, disgust flashing across her face. Yun Ruoyu nudged Yi Qianying with her elbow, gesturing for her to look. Yi Qianying glanced coolly at Li Qianxiao before lowering her head once more, as if this matter had nothing to do with her. Yun Ruoyu frowned slightly, dissatisfied with Yi Qianying's indifference. From the moment Li Qianxiao had walked through the door, Yun Ruoyu's gaze had been on him. When she saw how attentive Li Qianxiao was to Yun Ruoyan, she couldn't help but think that Yun Ruoyan was trying to seduce her brother again. However, it wasn't convenient for her to remind him, so she wanted Yi Qianying to speak to him. Unexpectedly, Yi Qianying didn't seem to care at all. Crown Prince, since your engagement with Qianying has already been decided, you should come to the Yun household more often and cultivate your relationship with her, the Yun matriarch said casually. Li Qianxiao glanced at Yi Qianying, who was standing to the side with her head lowered, and he couldn't help but feel annoyed. To him, a woman who was already in his hands was like a vegetable that had been overcooked. Of course, Li Qianxiao wouldn't let his disgust show on his face. Madam, you're right. I'll definitely come to the Yun household more often in the future. Coming to the Yun household was a must, but it was up to him, the Crown Prince, to cultivate his relationship with whoever he wanted. After all, Yi Qianying was only a concubine, and even if he were to leave the position of concubine to the Yun family, Yunlan wouldn't refuse. As long as she didn't have that ugly birthmark on her face, Yun Ruoyan's appearance, demeanor, strength, and status would be all to Li Qianxiao's liking. She was truly the best candidate for the crown prince's concubine. Haha. Behind Li Qianxiao, a young man wearing a light green robe and holding a folding fan chuckled and bowed deeply to the Yun matriarch. Madam, Xuanhuan wishes you a happy birthday. The Yun matriarch narrowed her eyes at the young man, and her smile deepened. Oh, second prince, when did you return? I only returned yesterday, and I managed to rush back just in time for your birthday. Li Xuanhuan walked up to the Yun matriarch and spoke with great familiarity. This was Yun Ruoyan's first time meeting Li Xuanhuan, and she couldn't help but take a second look at him. He looked a lot like the emperor Li Xiu, especially his long narrow eyes. But unlike Li Xiu, Li Xuanhuan had a feminine air about him. Perhaps it was because he had been heavily influenced by women as he grew up, and his actions and expressions were subconsciously feminine. As long as he didn't go overboard, he wasn't annoying at all. Li Xuanhuan took a rectangular box from one of his attendants and handed it to the Yun matriarch. Here's a gift for you. He slowly opened the box in front of the Yun matriarch, revealing a sparkling, snow-white scepter. The Yun matriarch's fondness for scepters was well known, and Yun Ruoyan's gift this time was a brocade quilt embroidered with a scepter in the shape of the god of longevity hugging the scepter. But in front of this jade scepter that was half a foot long and made of some unknown material, it paled in comparison. Li Xuanhuan gently picked up the scepter and handed it to the Yun matriarch. Madam, see if you like the gift I've prepared for you. The Yun matriarch held the scepter in her hands. It felt as warm and smooth as jade, but it wasn't jade, and it felt cool and refreshing to the touch. The Yun matriarch looked at Li Xuanhuan in surprise. Is this a pearl? But aren't pearls round? The crowd was also surprised by the Yun matriarch's words. Even Yi Qianying, who had been hanging her head like a dead chicken, craned her neck to look at the scepter. You have a good eye, madam. Li Xuanhuan slapped his folding fan against the palm of his other hand, looking very happy. While I was in the Qin kingdom, I caught a giant mussel spirit on my way out to sea, and I had someone place a jade scepter into the mussel's stomach. A year later, I took it out and it turned out to be a pearl scepter. Oh, how precious. Thank you, second prince. The Yun matriarch immediately beamed like a chrysanthemum. Of course, Li Xuanhuan replied. Yun Ruoyan hadn't expected the Yun matriarch to be so close to Li Xuanhuan. In her past life, Yun Ruoyan and the Yun matriarch hadn't been close at all. On her 80th birthday, Yun Ruoyan had only shown her face once before hiding in a corner. She had no idea what had happened or who had been present. Li Xuanhuan could feel Yun Ruoyan looking at him, and he looked back at her. His long, narrow eyes flashed, and Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but shiver. By the time Yun Ruoyan reacted, his eyes were full of smiles. Yun Ruoyan only hesitated for a moment before returning his smile. After exchanging greetings, Li Qianxiao and Li Xuanhuan left to talk to the other officials, while the Yun matriarch sent the scions of the family out to play. In the end, only Yun Ruoyan, Yun Ruoyao, Yun Ruoyu, and Yi Qianying were left to accompany the Yun matriarch. To Yun Ruoyao, staying by the Yun matriarch's side was the safest option, while the other three had to stay by Yun Ruoyan's side to prevent her from escaping before Madame and made her move. As noon approached, more people arrived. Feeling that the hall was too noisy, the Yun matriarch retired to a side hall to rest, and the four of them followed her. Just as the Yun matriarch sat down on a soft couch, Pei Zio suddenly walked in. Once again, Pei Zio presented a steel rui scepter, much more exquisite than the one he had given the Yun matriarch. However, with Li Qianyuan's pearl scepter, the Yun matriarch was no longer interested in his. The Yun matriarch couldn't even be bothered to look at it. She ordered Xiaolan to accept it, then exchanged a few pleasantries with Pei Zio. Pei Zio said that it wasn't convenient for Pei Xiong to enter the hall, so he had come on his father's behalf to pay his respects to the Yun matriarch. These two pleasantries brightened the Yun matriarch's mood. As Pei Zio spoke, he glanced at Yun Ruoyan from time to time. Yun Ruoyan guessed that he had something to say to her, but she ignored him. Ever since they had returned from the flower viewing party, Pei Zio had sent for Yun Ruoyan several times, informing her that the tiger canine arrowheads had been completed, but that Yun Ruoyan had to personally retrieve them from the Pei Manor. Yun Ruoyan knew that Pei Xiong and Pei Xiong must have concluded that she didn't dare to reveal the secret of the Thousand Beast Valley. After all, the secret was so important to the imperial family that revealing it would be tantamount to telling the emperor. She also knew that if the Pei family were to suffer, Xuanhuan wouldn't be able to escape unscathed. Actually, Pei Xiong had thought of this from the very beginning, but he didn't dare to take the risk, which was why he had asked Pei Zio to calm Xuanhuan down. Now that he was certain of this, he was no longer afraid. Xuanhuan, on the other hand, didn't want to step into the Pei manor. She had plenty of ways to get Pei Zio or even Pei Xiong to personally deliver what she wanted to her, but she didn't have the time to greet them right now. Xuanhuan glanced at her three cousins. Although they were trying their best to maintain their composure, the minute movements they made didn't escape Xuanhuan's eyes. Since Xuanhuan thought that she would be able to completely trip her up, how could she not play along and put on a good show for him? Chapter 104. Coincidentally, on the day that Xuanhuan left her quarters with the fox pelt, she bumped into Xilan and Linglan on her way to her quarters. The two of them were on their way to the storehouse to collect the silk needed for a quilt. The three of them joked around with each other for a while. Not long after, when Xilan and Linglan returned to Xuanhuan's quarters with the silk, they happened to see the spiritual master leaving along the path that Xuanhuan had taken. Xilan didn't pay much attention, but Linglan did. Because she was often summoned by Madame and for questioning, she was very familiar with the area around Xuanhuan's quarters. She knew that the path led to her quarters and she was a little puzzled. Why had a Taoist priest followed the young miss out of her quarters so soon after she left? The young miss had only mentioned that Madame and had mysteriously given her a fox pelt, and that the young miss had instructed them to take it back with them. She hadn't mentioned a Taoist priest at all. After returning to Xuanhuan's quarters, Linglan immediately reported the matter to Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan was also curious. When she had been speaking with Madame and outside, she had sensed that there was someone in the room, but she had assumed that it was just a servant. After hearing Linglan's report, she was certain that the person in the room wasn't a servant, but rather the Taoist priest that Linglan had seen. Even now, Xuanhuan still hadn't figured out why Madame and would bring a Taoist priest with her. Although she was confused, she didn't dwell on it. When she returned to the Lin manor, she brought the fox pelt and the bottle of wine that Linglan had given her. When Lin Qingqian saw the fox pelt, she was certain that it was actually the pelt of a fox with some spiritual energy, and that it was quite valuable. Not only humans but all living things in this world could absorb the spiritual energy of the world and the essence of the sun and moon to cultivate their own spiritual energy. With spiritual energy they would become spiritual foxes, and the pelt of spiritual foxes was naturally far superior to that of ordinary foxes. When Lin Qingqian heard that the pelt had been given to her by Madame Min, she also felt that there had to be a hidden agenda behind the Taoist priest's attentiveness. Lin Qingqian sniffed the bottle of wine and could immediately tell that it was realgar wine. Realgar wine wasn't a common beverage, and only demon hunters had a secret recipe for it. It wasn't sold in the market, and one had to pay a high price to buy it from a demon hunter. Ordinary people might have only heard of realgar wine in their entire lives, but they had never tasted it. In short, it was very precious. This was the first time Xuanhuan had seen such a wine. Lin Qingqian told Xuanhuan that realgar wine had the effect of boosting one's sex drive and warding off evil spirits. Even if consumed in small amounts, it could strengthen one's body. But why would Madame and allow Linglan to put such a precious realgar wine into her food? He couldn't possibly be thinking of treating her well silently, right? I'm going to subdue you like a monster. Xuanhuan and Lin Qingqian didn't react for a moment, but Lin Qingxue called out from the side. Although the two older sisters ignored her, Lin Qingxue heard every word of their conversation clearly. Lin Qingxue loved to listen to stories about demons and monsters, and would often pester Lin Zainan and Uncle Lin to tell her about them. The storyteller in the tea house who specialized in capturing demons and monsters was an old friend of hers. As a result, Lin Qingxue was far more knowledgeable about these matters than either of her sisters. Combining all the stories she had heard about hunting beasts, Lin Qingxue was able to quickly deduce what had happened. Sister Royan, your stepmother must have thought that you were possessed by a fox demon, Lin Qingxue explained. First, she sent a servant to put realgar wine in your food in an attempt to make you reveal your true form, but to no avail, she hired an old Taoist priest to subdue you. The fox skin was used to intimidate you, and the old Taoist priest hid it to observe your cultivation so that he could come up with a plan to deal with you. Lin Qingxue's explanation enlightened the two sisters. When Xuanhuan thought back to Madame Anne's attitude toward her, she confirmed Lin Qingxue's explanation. Based on Xuanhuan's understanding of Madame Anne, if she wanted to subdue her as a monster, she would definitely choose to do so in public, and the Yun matriarch's birthday would be the best opportunity. Even after learning of Madame Anne's scheme, Xuanhuan wasn't worried. Although she had been reborn as a vengeful ghost, she had nothing to do with demons. No matter how powerful a demon hunter Madame Anne hired, it would all be a joke. However, there were always exceptions to everything in this world, and the spiritual master was one such exception. Not only could the spiritual master tell that Xuanhuan wasn't a demon, but that she was a human furnace that only appeared once in 1,000 years, and he wanted to take her for himself. In a room not far from the main hall, the spiritual master was a little anxious. He had long wanted to subdue Xuanhuan and find a place to cultivate. "Don't worry, spiritual master, the auspicious hour is almost here," Madame Anne consoled. "When the auspicious hour arrives, you can subdue that demon in front of everyone. Wouldn't it be better to have both her and her name?" "She's not a demon," the spiritual master corrected. "Not only is she not a demon, she's a rare beauty." As the spiritual master said this, his eyes narrowed slightly, as if he were fantasizing about something wonderful. Madame Anne's heart was already filled with disdain for this sanctimonious old man, but she still maintained a respectful facade. "Spiritual master, if she's not a demon, how are you going to subdue her in front of everyone?" This was what Madame Anne was worried about. The spiritual master didn't respond. Instead, he waved at Madame Anne with a strange smile. Suddenly, Madame Anne saw a fox scurry out of his robes. Its entire body was a fiery red, and it looked very much like the fox pelt she had given Xuanhuan that day. As soon as the fox appeared, it clawed at Madame Anne's face, causing her to scream and kneel on the ground. "Spiritual master, save me. The fox demon is coming for me." Madame Anne covered her face as she screamed. The spiritual master smiled. "Don't be afraid, madam. That's just a small trick of mine. It won't hurt you." Madame Anne slowly removed her hand, but the fox was nowhere to be seen. "Where's the fox?" Madame Anne looked around. The spiritual master shrugged. "There's no fox and there's no demon. However, I can conjure up a fox and I can turn a normal person into a demon." 800 miles outside the capital, a few flaming steeds were galloping, their riders all dressed in black. "Your Highness, you're injured and you shouldn't use spiritual energy." Seeing that he was about to miss the Yun family's birthday banquet, Liamo was about to fly on his sword when a black-robed man by his side stopped him. "That's right, Your Highness, it's just a birthday banquet." "It's fine to be late," another black-robed man added. Liamo looked in the direction of the capital, his ice-blue eyes narrowed. Liamo's dantian had been shaken, and his spiritual vortex was in turmoil from the last few days of travel. If he were to use spiritual energy recklessly, his injuries would likely worsen. It would be best if he could find a place to rest, but he had an ominous premonition. He didn't expect that the old witch would choose to self-destruct and perish together with him after telling him what he wanted to know. Fortunately, he had moved quickly enough to leave in time, and he had only been shaken. The two black-robed guards who had entered the cottage with him weren't so lucky. Yunlan was still standing outside the Yun Manor. It was already past noon and almost all of the guests had arrived. All that was left was for the auspicious hour to begin the banquet. "Master, the auspicious hour is almost upon us. Please make your preparations," Old Wu urged as he walked out of the manor. Yunlan waved a hand, ignoring him, and continued to wait. After a while Yunfeng walked out. "Brother, the auspicious hour is almost here. Why are you still here?" "The slaughtering king isn't here yet," Yunlan replied. "Did the slaughtering king say that he'd definitely come?" Yunlan nodded. "I met the slaughtering king in the palace after morning court. He asked about my mother's birthday, so I personally delivered an invitation to the slaughtering king's manor." The slaughtering king personally accepted the invitation and said that he'd definitely come. Why isn't he here yet? It's not like you don't know the slaughtering king's personality. Even if he says he'll come, he might not. Yunfeng continued, "Brother, you should hurry in. Mother's already seated and she's waiting for you to lead the way. Don't delay the auspicious hour." The Li kingdom had its own set of etiquettes, and they naturally had their own set of etiquettes. Children and grandchildren were to be led by the highest-ranking member of the family and kowtow to the person of the birthday in front of all the guests at the auspicious hour. The auspicious hour was when the person of the birthday was born, and the Yun matriarch was born in the afternoon. Yunlan glanced at the sun above his head and said helplessly, "Let's go in." The large hall was packed with guests. The Yun matriarch sat at the head of the table, and her children and grandchildren stood below her in accordance with their seniority. The Yun matriarch had a total of 7 children. Her eldest daughter had already passed away, and her 2 concubine daughters had been married off to the Yu kingdom and the Qin kingdom. Madame An stood in the first row. In the second row were her 2 concubine sons and their daughters-in-law. Yun Ruoyan was the only grandchild and Yun Maxiao's seat was empty. Below Yun Ruoyan stood Yun Ruoyao, Yun Ruoyu, and a dozen or so concubine grandchildren. Because Yi Qianying wasn't a member of the Yun family, she could only blend in with the concubine children. Yun Ruoyan glanced at the empty seat beside her. In her past life, Yun Maxiao hadn't returned for the Yun matriarch's birthday either. Although the events of this life were roughly the same as in her past life, many of the details were different. Yun Ruoyan's change had caused many changes. As a result, Yun Ruoyan wasn't sure whether or when Yun Maxiao would return. Official Yun, how auspicious. May the god of longevity be blessed. Just then Yun Lan walked in followed by Yun Feng. The guests once again began to speak auspicious words. Yun Lan smiled and cupped his fists in greeting. Yun Feng and his 2 concubine brothers stood in a row. As soon as Yun Lan stood in front of the Yun matriarch, the ceremonial official began to chant, "The auspicious hour has come. Children and grandchildren kneel and bow to the god of longevity." After the ceremonial official finished, Yun Lan took the lead, and all the children and grandchildren knelt and bowed to the Yun matriarch. After the ceremony, Yun Lan stood up and began to say a few words of congratulations. "Your son kowtows to you, mother, and wishes you good fortune." Wait. Yun Lan's speech was suddenly interrupted by a loud voice. That voice was full of energy, and it was clear that the speaker had a high cultivation. Everyone turned to the door in shock, only to see a tall, thin yellow-robed Taoist standing there. This was none other than the malicious Taoist master. Chapter 105. The crowd looked toward the spiritual master and some of them recognized him. "Isn't that a demon hunter? What's he doing here? He doesn't look like a guest invited by official Yun. Did he come uninvited? Don't talk nonsense. There's only one reason why a demon hunter would come uninvited. There's a demon here. The Yun Manor is a peaceful place, so how could there be a demon here?" The spiritual master walked into the main hall amidst the crowd's gazes and chatter. Yun Lan looked displeased. Offering a birthday celebration at an auspicious time was very particular, and now that he'd been interrupted and missed the auspicious hour, he wouldn't be able to continue. "Yunji, who's this Taoist?" The Yun matriarch was naturally displeased as well. Yunji was Yun Lan's courtesy name and he replied, "He's a rather famous demon hunter in the capital. Allow me to ask him about the situation." After Yun Lan finished speaking, he walked towards the Taoist and Buddhist master. Yun Ruoyan's gaze, however, was on Madame N. Although she was trying her best to maintain a stern expression, her lips occasionally curled up in a smile. From this, Yun Ruoyan could tell that this Taoist had to be the demon hunter Madame N had hired to capture her. "Mistress, Xiao, mistress." Suddenly Xiao's nervous voice rang out in Yun Ruoyan's mind. "What's the matter, Xiao? I suddenly sensed a strange and powerful aura. Is someone coming?" Xiao asked. "A Taoist." Yun Ruoyan frowned. It seemed that Madame N hadn't just brought along a random Taoist priest, she was serious. But if Xiao was as powerful as she said, how could he not be able to tell that she wasn't a demon? Yun Ruoyan had to be careful. "What brings you to the residence of Yun all of a sudden?" Yun Lan asked as he welcomed the spiritual master. Although he was displeased by the spiritual master's sudden arrival, he still had to be polite before using force against a demon hunter. "I'm here to capture a demon, of course." The spiritual master didn't beat around the bush. "Capture a demon?" Yun Lan said in astonishment. "My residence of Yun has been peaceful for 100 years and there has never been a demon. I'm afraid you are mistaken." "Whether she's mistaken or not, we'll know once I've beaten her back to her original form." The spiritual master's gaze pierced through the crowd and landed squarely on Yun Ruoyan. "Taoist priest, do you mean that there are really demons here?" Yun Lan asked with a frown. Demon hunters didn't have nothing better to do, especially this somewhat famous Taoist and Buddhist Taoist master in front of him. Yun Lan still somewhat believed his words. "Of course. Please excuse me, Your Excellency." The spiritual master walked past Yun Lan and headed straight for Yun Ruoyan. "Master, this person's aura is very strange. His spiritual energy is very strong, and he doesn't seem like a cultivator of the orthodox path. Master, be careful." Xiao warned. Yun Ruoyan met the Taoist priest's gaze, and the coldness in his eyes made her heart clench. However, there was no killing intent in his gaze. Perhaps the other party wasn't just here to catch a demon. Perhaps the other party already knew that she wasn't a demon. What was he trying to do? She was now a peak 7th rank blade master, and before her spiritual sea expanded, the bracelet's power wouldn't be of much help to her. She was clearly no match for this old Taoist. She didn't dare use the Feilai blade in front of everyone, so she couldn't help but feel nervous. Grandmother. Under the gaze of the Taoist priest, Xuanhuan slowly retreated to the Yun matriarch's side and turned to the Yun matriarch. This old Taoist is so scary, I'm scared. The Yun matriarch tugged on Xuanhuan's hand and looked at the Taoist monk. Her voice was laced with anger. Taoist, my child is timid. Please don't scare her. Old madam, I have been rude. Miss Yun, if you don't wish to suffer any physical pain, please follow this humble Taoist. Taoist priest, what do you mean by this? Yun Lan asked from behind. The people watching the ceremony were also in an uproar at this time, discussing spiritedly. Where demon hunters suddenly appeared, there would definitely be demons. Could it be that a demon had appeared in the Yun family? Master, can't you tell? Madame walked out and pointed at Xuanhuan. She's possessed by a demon, and the real Xuanhuan has already been killed by this demon. What did you say? Yun Lan and the Yun matriarch exclaimed at the same time. The crowd was also in an uproar. Li Qianxiao and Li Qianyuan, who were watching the ceremony from the sidelines, were also stunned. Master, in just a few short months, Ruoyan seems to have changed into a completely different person. Don't you think it's strange? Madame turned to the Yun matriarch. Mother, would the Ruoyan of the past have made you happy like she does now? It's said that a leopard never changes its spots. Haven't any of you suspected that a person's personality would suddenly change so drastically? Grandmother, father? Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu also stood up with Madame and pointed at Yun Ruoyan. The Yun Ruoyan in front of you is possessed by a demon. Otherwise, how could she have broken through from a 3rd rank to a 7th rank blade master in just a few months? This isn't something a mortal can do. A 7th rank blade master? Yun Lan and the Yun matriarch were both shocked. Ruoyan, you're already a 7th rank blade master? Every month, the family academy would keep tabs on every student's progress, so that the head of the family would be able to better understand how strong the scions were. Because Yun Ruoyan wasn't at the academy, this was spared. Although Yun Ruoyao and the others suspected Yun Ruoyan's cultivation, they didn't have any concrete evidence, so they didn't report it to Yun Lan. It was only when the spiritual master was able to determine Yun Ruoyan's exact cultivation that Yun Ruoyan and the others dared to speak of it in public, and only then did Yun Lan and the Yun matriarch learn of Yun Ruoyan's true cultivation. Faced with their questions, Yun Ruoyan quickly came up with a response. My breakthrough was partly due to grandfather's pills, Yun Ruoyan explained. Coupled with the fact that I've been cultivating for a while now, I've been extremely talented. I've been extremely talented at cultivation since I was a child, and I became a 3rd rank blade master before I was 6. Now that I'm 13, if I hadn't stagnated for 3 years, wouldn't it be normal for me to become a 7th rank blade master? Yun Ruoyan's words were logical. She purposely avoided the fact that she had advanced 4 ranks in such a short period of time, and instead focused on her talent. Based on her previous talent, becoming a 3rd rank blade master at 6 and a 7th rank at 13 was indeed quite normal. Father, grandmother, I'm not a demon. Seeing that the Yun matriarch and Yun Lan's expressions had softened, Yun Ruoyan continued, demons all have demonic auras. Grandmother, I've been with you all this time. Have you sensed any demonic aura from me? You have such a high cultivation that even the realgar wine I fed you couldn't force you to reveal your true form. Of course you can hide your demonic aura, Madame replied. Mother, when did you feed me realgar wine? Why didn't I know? Yun Ruoyan pretended not to know anything. Mother had your maidservant secretly put it in your food. Of course you didn't know, Yun Ruoyu hurriedly explained. What? Yun Ruoyan looked at Madame heartbroken. Mother, I've always respected you, but you've done this to me. I didn't. Mother, you don't have to explain. Madame was about to explain, but Yun Ruoyan cut her off. Grandmother, I know that you're the only one in the Yun family who truly cares for me. I lost my mother when I was young, and because I was ugly no one liked me. Later, because I lost my talent for cultivation, I was chased out of the family academy. Yun Ruoyan looked pitifully at the Yun matriarch. But I never gave up on myself. I quietly endured everyone's mockery and bullying, cultivating alone. All I want is to regain my cultivation talent one day and let everyone look at me in a different light. Yun Ruoyan turned to Madame now that I've done it, my mother has colluded with demons to slander me and accuse me of being a demon. Is there really no place for an orphan like me in the Yun family? Madame Min knew that Xuanhuan wasn't a demon, and she couldn't help but feel a little guilty when she looked at her. Mother. Xuanhuan continued. Are you saying that I'm a demon because I'm not as useless, stupid, and ugly as I used to be? Which mother doesn't want her child to become better? Why would you accuse me of being a demon when I've become a better person? As the crowd listened to Xuanhuan's emotional narration, they began to guess at Madame Anne's motives. It wasn't uncommon for a wife-born child of a wife-born mother to try to get rid of that child to raise her own blood relative. As long as Xuanhuan led the crowd in this direction, they would immediately fill in the blanks on their own. Madame Anne was rendered speechless by Xuanhuan's argument, and even Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu didn't know how to respond. I believe you. You're my good granddaughter, not a demon, the Yun matriarch said, pointing at the spiritual master. At this moment, the Yun Shi said, then pointed at the Taoist Buddha, don't try to sow discord between our family. Please leave my Yun family. The Yun matriarch still wanted to ease the tension between the two families, so she turned to the spiritual master. Old Taoist, leave the house. There are no demons in the Yun family and we don't welcome you. The Yun matriarch's sons and daughters-in-law also began to coax the spiritual master. They were all members of the Yun family, and they had all seen what Madame Anne had done to Yun Ruoyan in the past. As a result, they were certain that Madame Anne had summoned the spiritual master. Madame Anne was incredibly anxious. Earlier, the spiritual master had told her that he could turn Yun Ruoyan into a demon, but that was actually an illusion. Just like the fox that he had conjured to scare Madame Anne, it was only an illusion created using spiritual energy to confuse others. Today, however, the spiritual master was going to conjure a powerful illusion to confuse everyone present. This illusion would take some time to complete, and Madame Anne was trying to stall for time. However, under Yun Ruoyan's incessant questioning, Madame Anne couldn't delay any longer. She called out to the spiritual master, "Spiritual master, spiritual master, hurry up." Just then, the spiritual master, who had remained motionless all this time, suddenly opened his arms and drew a large circle in the air. The prayer beads in his hands began to emit a faint Buddhist glow. The glow wasn't particularly bright, but it gradually filled the entire hall. Chapter 106. Taoism and Buddhism were two separate schools of thought. Although they weren't enemies, they had to defend each other. This was a rule that had been in place for thousands of years. But now, a Taoist priest was able to unleash a Buddhist aura. Yun Ruoyan was no exception. She stared intently at the Taoist priest, ready to deal with his attack at any moment. If it really came down to it, Yun Ruoyan wouldn't hesitate to release the Falai blade to kill the Taoist priest. The beads in the Taoist priest's hand glowed brighter and brighter. Yun Ruoyan didn't know what poison he was planning, and she couldn't help but feel nervous. Yun Ruoyan curled her fingers and began to circulate the spiritual energy in her body, ready to attack at any moment. But just as she was about to circulate the spiritual energy in her body, she felt an irrepressible pain on the right side of her face. Ah! Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but cry out, but the pain only grew more intense. The pain was as if someone was cutting her face with a knife. It was a blunt knife and it was a sharp pain. Ah! Yun Ruoyan cried out once more. She covered her face with her hands and couldn't help but bend over. The crowd, who had been stunned by the Buddhist aura in the Taoist priest's hand, finally reacted to Yun Ruoyan's sudden cry and painful movements. "Ruoyan, what's wrong?" the Yun matriarch asked. "The master's demon-subduing technique is working." Madame Anne hurriedly exclaimed. "Xiaolan, hurry up and help the old madam away from that demon. She's about to reveal her true form." The crowd was in an uproar. Could Miss Yun really be a demon? That shouldn't be the case. None of us are afraid of this Buddhist aura, but she is. Looks like she really is a demon. By this time, Yun Ruoyan was in so much pain that she wanted to smash her face into the ground. Her entire body was curled up into a ball. Chiu-chiu, what's wrong with me? My face, why does it hurt so much?" Yun Ruoyan called out to Chiu-chiu in her mind. She felt that she wouldn't be able to think if the pain continued, and she wouldn't be able to communicate with Chiu-chiu. "Mistress, you've been poisoned." Chiu-chiu was also extremely anxious, but it couldn't do anything about it. It was sealed and couldn't leave the bracelet's pocket dimension. And even if it did, given its current strength and appearance, it would be just as dangerous as Yun Ruoyan's. Poisoned? Yun Ruoyan was a little surprised. When had she been poisoned? Master, the poison was on your face, but it's already starting to spread throughout your entire body. Xiao paced around anxiously in the bracelet's pocket dimension. Damn it. She finally remembered how she had been poisoned. That damned Rong Yuehong. Even if she's going to die, she's going to drag me down with her. Beside the birthmark on Yun Ruoyan's right cheek was a red mark left by Rong Yuehong's fingernails. So this girl had come to take her life all along. Rong Yuehong had already smeared the poison on her fingernails. She only needed to scratch her nails lightly on Yun Ruoyan's body to claim her life. She should have known that, given Rong Yuehong's personality, she wouldn't have just asked her to carry him. Ever since her reincarnation, Yun Ruoyan had always been cautious, and she hadn't expected to fall for so many tricks. In her current state, she couldn't even summon the Feilai blade, much less use spiritual energy. Could it be that he could only be manipulated by others? Look, the demon has revealed itself. Madame suddenly yelled. Everyone's eyes were on Yun Ruoyan. She was lying on the ground, her head on the ground, and 9 long fox tails had suddenly sprouted from her lower body. The tails were snow white, and their fur was fluffy and large. Each tail was at least 3 meters long, and when they swung together, it was as if they were ready to attack the people around them at any moment. Ah, Ruoyan. The Yun matriarch stared in shock at Yun Ruoyan's sudden growth of tails. Even Yunlan was dumbfounded. Master, look. She's a demon, and Yun Ruoyan's a 9-tailed fox demon. Madame called out to Yunlan. She was both nervous and surprised. The scene before her eyes was simply too real. Even though the Taoist priest had told her that this was only an illusion, she still couldn't believe that the scene before her was real. Yunlan reacted and immediately helped the Yun matriarch down so that Xiaolan could take her to a safe location. The Yun matriarch stared at Yun Ruoyan as the others helped her to the side. Demon, the demon has appeared. Run. The demon will eat you. Among the spectators were a few officials, women, and children. When they saw this scene, all of them turned pale with fright. By the time they reacted, they were screaming and running out of the hall. Some of the more advanced cultivators stayed behind, surrounding Yun Ruoyan and the spiritual master from afar. Li Qianxiao and Li Xuanhuan were surrounded by the guards as they retreated to a corner of the hall. She's actually a demon. Li Qianxiao exclaimed in disbelief. Li Xuanhuan only narrowed his slender eyes, not saying a word. Father, Sister Ruoyan must have been harmed by this demon a long time ago. Let's kill this demon and avenge Sister Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu stood on either side of Yunlan, one after the other. Yi Qianying had long since retreated with the other scions of the Yun family. Master Taoist, what should we do with this demon? Yunlan asked the spiritual master. Everyone, don't act rashly. The spiritual master was afraid that the crowd would attack Yun Ruoyan at the same time. Leave this demon to me, I'll subdue it myself. The spiritual master looked at Yun Ruoyan's pained appearance on the ground. His illusions weren't meant to harm anyone. His plan was to trick the crowd into thinking that Yun Ruoyan was a demon. Then he would capture Yun Ruoyan and take her away. But now Yun Ruoyan looked as if she'd been poisoned. It seems like Madame didn't trust me and she's done it herself. The spiritual master turned to glare at Madame confused. Madame urged, Spiritual master, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and subdue her. If Yun Ruoyan were to die, the spiritual master's efforts would be in vain. Without hesitation, he threw the prayer beads in his hand at Yun Ruoyan. The beads grew larger and larger in the air, then fell onto Yun Ruoyan's head and bound her up. Because of the poison, the right side of Yun Ruoyan's face was swollen and deformed once more. Under the excruciating pain, she began scratching at her face. He wouldn't let her hurt him. Even so, Yun Ruoyan's face had been scratched by herself, and purplish-red blood flowed down her fingers and onto the qilin beads on her wrist. Li Mo's flaming steed had already reached the edge of the capital, and they could see the eastern gates of the capital from afar. Your Highness, we're here, the black-clad man by Li Mo's side called out. Wasn't it just a birthday banquet? Why would the prince, who wouldn't even frown if the sky were to collapse, rush to the banquet without a care for his injuries, and even risk using spiritual energy? Just as Li Mo's brows relaxed, he felt a sharp pain in his right index finger, and his brows furrowed. The qilin beads were stained with Li Mo's blood, and his sudden pain was a warning from the qilin beads that the wearer was in danger. The gates of the capital were right in front of them, and the black-clad man by Li Mo's side had already taken out his token to enter the city. However, Li Mo suddenly leapt into the air and galloped into the city. Your Highness, the black-clad man called out to the skies. Find me at the Yun Manor, Li Mo's voice rang out in his mind. The 5 or 6 black-clad men all looked in the direction that Li Mo had disappeared, and one of them asked, Su Bei, where did His Highness go? To the Yun Manor. Su Bei continued galloping toward the eastern gates of the capital. In the main hall of the Yun Manor, Yun Ruoyan, bound by the prayer beads, was rolling on the floor in pain, banging her head against the ground from time to time. The poison was extremely potent, causing excruciating pain, but not causing her to faint. Instead, the more pain she felt, the more awake she became. Yun Ruoyan couldn't even knock herself out. Xiaoqiu was also rolling around in the bracelet's pocket dimension. Although it had lost contact with Yun Ruoyan, it could still feel her pain. Why don't you stop, beast? The spiritual master removed the gourd from his waist, walked to Yun Ruoyan's side, and poured the contents of the gourd onto her body. Then Yun Ruoyan turned into a 9-tailed white fox, lying motionless on the ground. The spiritual master cradled the white fox in his arms and hurriedly walked out. His medicinal wine could only suppress the poison in Yun Ruoyan's body for a short while, and he had to find a way to cure her as soon as possible. If a rare human furnace were to die in front of him, he would be so annoyed that he would vomit blood. Taoist. Madam walked over and blocked the Taoist priest's path. Taoist priest, please stay. Madam wanted the spiritual master to explain everything clearly, such as how he had discovered that Yun Ruoyan was a demon, and why he had suddenly appeared. If she didn't explain everything clearly and the Yun matriarch and Yun Lan questioned her, Madam would have to explain herself once more. But before Madam could finish her sentence, the Taoist monk flung Madam aside with a furious wave of his sleeve. Who told you to poison her? If she dies, I won't forgive you. Taoist priest, what's the meaning of this? Yun Lan stepped forward to stop the Taoist Buddha from attacking Madam and, get out of my way. The poison in Yun Ruoyan's body was getting deeper and deeper, and the spiritual master had completely lost his patience. Seeing how protective the spiritual master was of the fox in his arms, Yun Lan couldn't help but feel suspicious. Taoist, if you're leaving, you can leave the fox behind. Oh, Lord Yun still wants to compete with me, the Buddhist priest said in a low voice. Yun Lan had already gotten into position. Having seen the spiritual master use his divine arts, he knew that he was a master, and he didn't bother hiding his strength. Yun Lan channeled all of his 9th-rank spiritual energy, and a dazzling ball of spiritual energy appeared in his hand. The spiritual master snorted. If you want to spar, sure, but today's not the time. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned into a cloud of black smoke and flew away from Yun Lan's side. Yun Lan hurriedly chased after the black smoke into the courtyard, but it didn't stop for even a moment. Just as the black smoke was about to fly away, a black figure stepped on a green light and appeared above the Yun family's courtyard in the blink of an eye. Bastard, how dare you touch my woman? A cold voice rang out from the sky. Chapter 107. It's the Slaughtering King. The Slaughtering King is here. Some of the sharp-eyed cultivators recognized the man standing on a sword in the sky. It was none other than the Slaughtering King, Li Mo. Naturally, the spiritual master had heard of Li Mo's name before, and he didn't dare to linger any longer. He transformed into a cloud of black smoke and flew westward. Li Mo immediately blocked the spiritual master's path. Not daring to face him head-on, the spiritual master turned to the southwest, only to find Li Mo standing in front of him again. Just like that, the Taoist priest tried to escape in all directions, only to be cornered by Li Mo. Li Mo's expression was cold, and a blue light flashed in his inky eyes. Amidst the black smoke, he saw Yun Ruoyan in the embrace of a centipede spirit that was completely black in color. Yun Ruoyan's veil had fallen off, and the right side of her face was swollen and deformed. Clearly she had been poisoned. Although Yun Ruoyan couldn't move or speak, she hadn't fainted. As a result, the pain continued to torment her, and tears began to stream down her cheeks. Li Mo's hands behind his back clenched into fists. Seeing that he couldn't escape from Li Mo, the spiritual master dispersed his black smoke and revealed his true form. Your Highness, I'm only trying to capture a demon. Why are you forcing me? This 1,000-year fox demon harmed the young mistress of the Yun Manor, and it even tried to confuse the crowd. I'm only capturing it for the sake of the common people. You bastard. Li Mo interrupted him coldly, then waved his sleeves at the spiritual master. The beads on Yun Ruoyan's body that had been glowing with Buddhist light dimmed. Everyone was looking up at the sky. The Yun matriarch and the scions of the Yun family had also emerged from a side hall, and they saw that the fox in the spiritual master's arms had reverted to Yun Ruoyan's appearance. Do you think a mere illusion can fool those idiots down there? Do you think you can fool me? Liemo said coldly. It's really a demon crying demon. Liemo had infused his spiritual energy into his words, so that everyone could hear him clearly. So Yun Ruoyan wasn't a demon, and everything had been an illusion created by the spiritual master. Could it be that the Taoist priest was the demon? Shilan, Peony and Ling Lan had been helping out from behind the scenes. When the commotion broke out in the main hall, they found out that Yun Ruoyan had been captured by a Taoist priest. The three anxious maids wanted to find Yun Lan and tell him that their young miss wasn't a demon, and that everything had been part of Madame Anne's scheme. But the crowd was chaotic and they were squeezed out of the hall. When the three of them heard the slaughtering king's words, they immediately cried out, "Our young mistress isn't a demon. That demon was hired by Madame Wang to harm our young mistress. We saw it with our own eyes." Old master, old madam, this evil Taoist conspired with first madam to harm young Mississippi. Yes, old master, old madam, please save miss. The three maidservants spoke one after another with tears streaming down their faces. Master, mother, don't listen to those girls' nonsense. I didn't harm Ruoyan. Madam Anne was also in a state of panic. The development of the situation had far exceeded her expectations. Why had the spiritual master suddenly turned on her? Why had the slaughtering king suddenly appeared? Yun Lan glanced at Madame Anne coldly. Although he didn't say a word, his gaze was enough to frighten Madame Anne, and she couldn't help but take a step back. Mother. Yun Ruoyao supported Madame Anne from behind and whispered in her ear, "Mother, don't panic. Yun Ruoyan seems to have been poisoned and she might not survive. If she dies, it doesn't matter if she's a demon or human." When Madame Anne heard Yun Ruoyao's words, she hurriedly looked up and prayed that Yun Ruoyan wouldn't survive. The spiritual master wasn't relaxed either. The fact that Liemo had been able to see through his illusions so easily and see through his disguise meant that Liemo's spiritual energy cultivation was far superior to his own. It was clearly unwise to oppose someone as strong as Liemo, but Yun Ruoyan was simply too tempting to the spiritual master. If he were to give up now, he might never be able to advance any further in his life, and he would forever be a centipede demon. As a result, the spiritual master decided to give it a try. "Impressive, Your Highness." The spiritual master turned to Liemo, "But she's in my hands now. If you dare make a move, I'll kill her immediately. If you dare touch her, I'll tear your bones apart and turn you to dust." Liemo's voice was cold and indifferent, but his anger was obvious. Suppressing his anger, he continued, "I don't care what kind of demon you are. Put down the person in your arms and I'll spare your life." "Please calm down, Your Highness." The spiritual master laughed. "This woman is so ugly that she doesn't pique my interest at all. I don't think your taste is that bad. However, I'm guessing that the reason you're so protective of her is because of her unique constitution." Liemo didn't respond, but he had already sentenced the spiritual master to death in his heart. He was the only one in the world who knew that Yun Ruoyan was a human furnace. Since this spiritual master knew, then he had to die. The spiritual master relaxed when Liemo remained silent. "There are too many people here. Your Highness, why don't we find a place where we can talk and make a deal?" Liemo's eyes were as cold as ice by this point. He looked at the spiritual master's fingers around Yun Ruoyan's neck, his fingers long and slender, and his fingernails gleamed with a sheen of sharpness. If he hadn't been injured, he could have teleported away to save Yun Ruoyan. However, the journey on the sword had been so turbulent that Liemo wasn't confident that he could rescue Yun Ruoyan unscathed. "Sure." Liemo took out a pill from his robes and tossed it to the spiritual master for Yun Ruoyan to swallow. The spiritual master caught the pill and saw that it was a high-grade antidote. He smiled at the slaughtering king's generosity before feeding it to Yun Ruoyan. After swallowing the antidote, Yun Ruoyan finally closed her eyes and fainted. The spiritual master led the way with Yun Ruoyan, and Liemo followed closely behind. Two streaks of sword light, one green and one black, sped westward. As Yun Lan watched them leave, he called out to the sky, "Your Highness, I'll leave my daughter in your care." "Don't worry, official Yun. With uncle around, nothing will happen to Miss Yun," Li Qinyuan said, coming to Yun Lan's side. The spiritual master stopped at a patch of forest, and Liemo perched on a treetop about 30 feet away from him. "Your Highness, I know I'm no match for you." The spiritual master turned to Liemo, "I can hand Miss Yun over to Your Highness, but you have to agree to one condition." "What conditions?" Li-Mo's voice was devoid of any emotion, only icy coldness. When your highness is done and she's no longer useful to you, the spiritual master raised an eyebrow. Can you return her to me? Although the spiritual master didn't say it explicitly, his meaning was clear enough. After the slaughtering king broke through his bottleneck, he would lend the cauldron to him. In the spiritual master's eyes, Xuanhuan's ugly appearance was beneath the slaughtering king's notice, and the slaughtering king had been protecting her for the same reason, to use her to improve his cultivation. Once Li-Mo broke through, the cauldron wouldn't be of any use to him. Li-Mo's fingernails grew out of his hands, and his lips curved in a cold smile. All right, I agree to your request. Can you hand her over to me now? That won't do. The spiritual master smiled. It's not that I don't trust you, slaughtering king, but this treasure is far too important. Whether or not I can break through to become a 9th-rank blade master depends entirely on this cauldron. After a moment's thought he continued, I want you to swear an oath to the heavens that if you break this oath, you'll be struck by lightning and die a horrible death. The people of the Xuanhuan continent believed in the existence of immortals, and believed that humans could become immortals through cultivation. As a result, the people of the Xuanhuan continent, especially those who cultivated, took their oaths very seriously. Your Highness, you're a man of your word. If you make this oath, I'll believe you and immediately hand this woman over to you. And if I don't? The slaughtering king sneered. A cold glint appeared in the spiritual master's eyes. If your excellency, the slaughtering king, wishes to take this cauldron for yourself, then let us both perish together. If I can't have it, then neither can your highness. The spiritual master stared at Li-Mo, waiting for his reply. At the same time, his hand on Xuanhuan's neck didn't loosen in the slightest. After a short silence, Li-Mo spoke again. I swear that if I break my promise to you, I'll be struck by lightning and die a horrible death. Good. The spiritual master laughed heartily and made a hand seal. The beads that bound Xuanhuan returned to his hand. 3 years from now, I'll go to your manor and ask for this cauldron. The spiritual master tossed Xuanhuan to Li-Mo, who caught her firmly in his arms. Farewell. The spiritual master cupped his fists toward Li-Mo before turning to leave. What he didn't expect, however, was for Li-Mo to appear in front of him once more, blocking his path. Your Highness, what's the meaning of this? The spiritual master frowned. I've already handed her over to you. Are you going to break your oath? Li-Mo didn't respond to the spiritual master's question. Instead, he held Xuanhuan in one hand and opened his other hand in front of him. Sharp, hard, and metallic nails began to grow on his fair, slender fingers. Slaughtering king, don't you humans value oaths the most? The spiritual master finally began to panic. Aren't you afraid of being struck by lightning? Haha. Li-Mo laughed. If you can tell that I'm a human cauldron, can't you tell that I'm not human at all? That you're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.